Lucina, out of breath, runs as fast as she can through the night forest away from the house. The girl remembers the Baroness's evil words that she is a disgrace like her mother. The woman hit the girl in the face with all her might for daring to answer her. People mock Lucina because she is the illegitimate daughter of Lord Burke, and her mother is famous in the pleasure districts. The girl touches the abrasion on her face and wonders whether it is worth treating. Lucina looks around and is surprised to notice that the forest in this part is completely dry. Walking deep into the forest, the girl feels the heat and wonders if there was really a fire here. Lucina goes out to the edge of the forest and sees a huge dragon lying right in front of her. The heroine notices that the animal's entire body is wounded and covered in blood. The girl boldly approaches the huge monster, who, seeing a man, tries with all his might to get up. Pointing to the wing, Lucina asks if it hurts and asks if the beast wants her to help him. The girl fearlessly looks at the beast and asks him not to worry, she will ease his pain. Lucina places her hands on the dragon's wounds, and a ghostly blue light appears under her palms. Concentrating, the girl realizes that the beast has too many wounds, and she will need a lot of strength. The heroine knows very well how painful it is to be wounded, so she decides that she must stop the dragon's suffering. The dragon moves his absolutely healthy wing in surprise and notices that the girl who saved him is lying unconscious. Moving to the side, the dragon lifts its head to the sky and flames light up around it. After some time, the dragon instead transforms into a handsome young man. The man leans over the girl and thoughtfully says that she is a fearless person. Lucina opens her eyes and hears a human voice, but she is too weak and cannot make out a word. Lucina looks at herself in the mirror in surprise and cannot recognize herself. The girl hears the maids whispering that because of the high sulfur content, the girl's face is a complete mess, but her hair color is pleasant. The maids gossip that the king loves the golden-haired ones, and Lucina will not just be a concubine, but a toy in the hands of the king. The girl sadly thinks that soon as she turns 20, she will be sold to the elderly king. Squeezing her hand in despair, the heroine reflects that 10 years ago she should have run away while she had the chance. The maids apply makeup to the girl, as ordered by the Baroness, in the hope that it will subside on the way to the capital. Finally, Lucina is ready. No matter how hard they try to spoil her, you cannot hide her youth and freshness. The Baroness looks at the girl with contempt and declares that nothing can correct her ugly face. The woman fears that the king may be disappointed because he is expecting to see the beauty, but suddenly the woman is interrupted by her son. The young man asks his mother not to worry because he has prepared an excellent price for the girl. The guy opens a casket, which is filled with gold and precious stones. The young man says that the black magician told him that there is a lot of gold in the graves near the border with the lands of Tyre. The woman asks in horror if her son has just returned from robbing the place where the Dragon Thayer's people bury their ancestors. The Baroness says in despair that her son is just an idiot for getting involved with the Thayerites and their graves. Suddenly, a terrible roar is heard, the castle shakes, and stones fall from the ceiling. Looking out the window, Lucina sees that the castle is being attacked by dozens of dragons, burning everything in their path. Huge warriors on horseback burst into the castle. The knights shout in despair that they were attacked by the Thayerites. Lucina hears the leader of the attackers ordering the exit to be blocked so that no one can escape. Suddenly, the leader looks out the window and meets the girl's gaze. Lucina hides in horror under the window and covers her mouth with her hands. But for some reason, the barbarian's gaze seemed familiar to her. Taking off his mask, the Thayerite king orders to burn everyone who dared to desecrate their graves. The guard reports to the lady that the walls are melting, and the enemies want to destroy them all. The Baroness orders a white flag to be immediately hung and an announcement that they are surrendering. Lucina decides that she must take this chance and try to escape. The girl runs down the corridor and decides that if she goes to the stone tower to the north, she can climb over the wall. Running out into the yard, the heroine thinks that this time she must escape. Otherwise, she will not have any more chances. One of the warriors informs his master that the people have hung out a white flag and asks what they should do next. Looking at the people with contempt, the king of the barbarians orders everyone to be beheaded and their heads hung on the wall. Looking at the execution, the Baroness's son falls to his knees and begs to spare him, assuring that he will return all the treasures. The king looks at the young man with a grin and declares that his request is simply ridiculous. He cannot live after desecrating their graves. Leaving, the man orders the entire wall to be burned and everyone killed, sparing no one. The guy sobs, blaming the dark magician for everything because it was he who advised him to rob the graves. The Baroness, in desperation, realizes that she must do something, otherwise they will all die. The woman asks the king to wait and declares that she will give him her daughter. The woman shouts that her daughter is beautiful and was chosen by King Brian himself. The Baroness knows that the two kings are irreconcilable enemies, and if you say that your daughter is related to Brian, then this will probably interest the barbarian. The Baroness confidently reports that King Brian was supposed to marry her daughter today. The man looks intently at the woman and asks where, in this case, is her daughter. The Baroness looks around in fear and realizes that Lucina has escaped. Meanwhile, the girl confidently climbs the stairs to the tower. Looking around, Lucina reflects that she should take advantage of the fact that all the knight's attention is focused on the wall. Suddenly, the girl freezes from a strange sound, similar to the sound of wings. At the same moment, one of the dragons grabs the girl by the hand, tearing her away from the stairs. Flying over the wall, Lucina looks at the heads in horror and realizes that all the castle knights have been beheaded. The dragon throws the girl to the ground and, raising her head, she finds herself face to face with the barbarian king. The man notices that the girl is not so beautiful. Does the old king really want her? But suddenly the man notices that the girl has mysterious eyes that look like stars in the night sky at the same time. The king remembers the events of 10 years ago and realizes that he has already seen these eyes. The man thinks that he landed not far from here that time, and that girl must live here. The barbarian examines the girl's hair and realizes that it is not at all the same as his savior's. The Baroness says that if the king likes her daughter, she will prepare her and bring her. The man points a spear at Lucina, lifts her chin with the blade, and says that he will give her a choice. The barbarian reveals that the girl can become his soulmate. Staring intently at Lucina, the king continues that she can choose to be buried with the others. Without hesitation, the heroine announces that she agrees to marry the barbarian. The king is somewhat embarrassed by such a quick choice and asks what the name of his chosen one is. Having learned the name, the man says that it is translated as moon from the Bryonian language. The king says that the name suits the girl and says that his name is Hakan. The man leans towards the girl's ear and says that he will take good care of her. Hakan declares that a priest must be present at weddings in Brian and looks around thoughtfully. Noticing a servant among the captives, the king approaches him and says that he intends to get married right now. The women look at the barbarian in bewilderment. Everything happens too unexpectedly. Hakan states that there must be a witness to his marriage at the wedding. The priest asks who it will be. The barbarian declares with a smug grin that the witness will be none other than their king. The man tells everyone after the wedding to tell Brian that Hakan took his wife. The barbarian laughingly says that he is just repaying the debt to the old king for killing the young dragons 10 years ago. Baroness Burke thinks with horror that the barbarian is using Lucina only to get even with Brian. The couple stands before the shaking priest, who begins the ceremony. Suddenly, Hakan looks around and notices that the chaos around is not at all like a wedding and orders flowers to be brought. The warriors carry out the king's orders, and the man hands the bouquet to his bride. Lucina looks at the flowers in amazement, and Hakan notes that according to tradition, the bride should hold a bouquet of flowers. Turning to the priest, the barbarian orders the wedding ceremony to begin. At the end of the ceremony, the priest says in a trembling voice that now the groom can kiss the bride. Hearing about the kiss, Lucina shudders in fear. Everything happens too quickly and unexpectedly. Noticing the girl's horror, the priest decisively says that you can skip the kiss and start straight to prayer. Hakan categorically refuses prayer, declaring that he does not believe in the god to whom they pray in this kingdom. Realizing that there is no choice, the priest invites the couple to confirm their vow with a kiss, and he can finish the ceremony. Hakan approaches Lucina, carefully hugs the girl, pulls her towards him, and kisses her tenderly. The girl begins to feel dizzy from an overabundance of emotions and faints. One of the warriors laughingly remarks that the king barely touched the girl, and she had already lost consciousness. Hakan confidently declares that even his kiss is dangerous. Getting ready to leave, the barbarian says that he is saving the lives of the Baroness and her son only because the same blood flows in them as in his wife. The king continues with a threat that if they dare to approach their graves again, he will wipe the castle from the face of the earth. The dragons leave, and the Baroness, in despair, tells her son that they must return Lucina. Seeing the bewilderment on the young man's face, the woman explains that she sold the girl to King Brian and cannot just give her to the barbarians. Looking around, the Baroness realizes that all their guards are dead, so only hired killers can help them. Lucina wakes up and looks around in surprise, not remembering how she ended up in the carriage. Noticing the girl at the window, the warrior informs the king that his wife has already woken up. Hakan turns to the carriage, but Lucina closes the window with the curtain in fear. The man grins and orders his warriors to stop and set up camp. Lucina hides in fear in the carriage, remembering the events of the past evening. Looking into the carriage, Hakan wonders how the girl is feeling. Lucina shakes with fear and mutters that she is fine. The king extends his hand to the bride and notices that she has not eaten all day and must be hungry. Lucina continues to shake and replies that she is not hungry and would rather stay in the carriage. Hakan suddenly starts laughing and notices that his wife is very shy. The king again holds out his hand and says that it will be cold at night, so it is better to go to the fire. Suddenly, Lucina smells food and realizes that she is really hungry. The girl leans on Hakan and decides to get out of the carriage. The warrior accompanies the king and his bride to the tent prepared for them. Lucina sits closer to the fire, and Hakan carefully covers her with his cloak. The man hands the girl a sandwich and offers to eat while the food is warm. The girl sniffs the food, not daring to try it. In the Baron's house, she ate only stale, moldy bread. Hakan, misjudging the bride's indecisiveness, declares that there is no poison in the food, and she can eat it calmly. Lucina takes a bite and freezes in surprise. She has never eaten such delicious food. The girl greedily rushes into the sandwich and bites off huge pieces. The king pours a drink into a cup and notices that if his wife eats so greedily, she might choke. The man hands Lucina a mug and says that it contains sheep's milk and that it is also not poisoned. The girl drinks, remembering that in the castle she had to run errands all day to get breadcrumbs. Hakan thoughtfully examines the bride and wonders how old she is. Upon learning that Lucina has turned 20, the man thoughtfully remarks that she is too young to be the bride of an elderly king. Hakan is furious and reveals that Brian is crazy. 10 years ago, he sent assassins to kill innocent young dragons. In that battle, the man lost his brother, who was a great king at that time. Hakan had to urgently return in order to take the throne as soon as possible and ensure the security of his country. And if that day the dragon had not been seriously wounded and had not fallen into the forest, he would have gone alone and taken the head of King Brian. Suddenly, the man asks if Lucina regrets that she will now not be able to become the king's bride, but she violently shakes her head. Hakan suddenly realizes that he also killed innocent people, and for the girl, he must be no different from Brian. Lucina looks up at the man and timidly asks where Thayer's lands are. Hakan looks at the bride in surprise. He expected her to cry and ask to go home, but the girl looks calm. Breaking another sandwich, the dragon says that the people of Brian consider Thayer to be the lands of barbarians and monsters, but this is not at all true. The king hands Lucina food and says that she will soon see everything with her own eyes. The girl unexpectedly comes to the conclusion that life with Hakan will be much more pleasant than her life in the Baron's castle. The man notices that the bride needs to be patient, and when she returns to the palace, she will be able to eat much better food. Looking up from her sandwich, Lucina calmly says that she is still quite happy with everything. The king never ceases to be surprised. The girl, as the daughter of Brian aristocrats, must be very selective. Hakan declares that once his wife has finished eating, she can settle down in the tent, but he still needs to take off his armor. Lucina shudders in fear. She did not expect that they would have to spend the night in the same tent. Hakan calmly undresses, but Lucina, with a frightened cry, tries to hide in her cloak and declares that she will remain outside. The man gently touches the girl's shoulder and says that she doesn't have to do that at all. Hakan picks up Lucina and notices that they have been husband and wife since yesterday. The king chuckles and says that after the wedding ceremony, they should sleep together. Håkon thoughtfully says that in Brian the wedding night is called the consummation of marriage. Lucina looks at the man in complete horror with eyes full of tears and shakes with fear. The embarrassed king reveals that in Thayer, marriage is usually done first, and then, if the woman is pregnant, a wedding ceremony is held. Lucina is completely confused and does not understand how you can first sleep with a man, get pregnant, and only then marry him. Håkon gently wipes the bride's face and says that he did not mean to make her cry. The man asks if being the wife of an old king is better than marrying a dragon. Lucina replies that she is simply scared that things are moving too quickly. Håkon understands that it must be very scary for a girl to be taken from her home and married to one of the barbarian clan. The king gets up, heads to the exit, and declares that the girl need not be afraid. He will not do anything to her. Opening the entrance of the tent, Håkon says that Lucina can rest in peace, and he will remain outside. Talon, seeing his king, asks in surprise why he came and left his wife alone. Håkon sits down with a heavy sigh and announces that he will sleep outside that night. The king doubts that his wife will remain human after being kidnapped and brutalized all day and night. Talon notes with skepticism that the king initially wanted to kill everyone, so why did he suddenly begin to worry about the girl's feelings? Håkon threateningly says that the warrior must choose his words carefully because Lucina is now his wife. Talon declares that he does not recognize his king. Not only does he care about the woman, it is also because of her that he left her mother and brother alive. The king thoughtfully admits that Lucina reminds him very much of someone. The man thinks that his savior should also live in the castle, and by releasing Burke's people, he will repay her debt. Talon states that, be that as it may, it is very good that his king has found a bride, because he needs an heir. The warrior tells the king that creating an heir to the dragon clan is hard work, and therefore he should try to be as close to the bride as possible. Lucina wakes up, rubs her eyes, and is surprised to realize that morning has come. The girl remembers that before falling asleep she cried for a long time, and now, with smudged makeup, her face must look terrible. Looking out of the tent, Lucina hears the murmur of water and realizes that somewhere nearby there is a stream in which she can wash herself. Looking at her reflection in the water, the girl notices that the red spots on her face have become much more noticeable. Lucina debates whether to treat the spots, but remembering Håkon's words about her wedding night, she decides that she must look as bad as possible. Suddenly, the girl hears a noise behind her and, turning around, notices a man standing. Having grabbed the girl, one of the mercenaries notes that they need to get into the forest as quickly as possible so that the dragons cannot find them. Hearing the Baroness's name in a conversation, Lucina thinks in despair that she cannot return to the castle. It starts to rain, and one of the men says that if you enter the forest without an offering, the dwarven elf Fuka will send rain. After a while, the kidnapper notices that the girl is shaking too much. Having examined Lucina's face, the man comes to the conclusion that she is sick with something. The mercenaries think that the girl has caught a barbarian infection. They don't want to lose a lot of money, but they are also afraid of catching a fatal disease. Suddenly, the kidnapper sees that his partner's neck is pierced by an arrow and he falls dead. Håkon and Talon prepare to attack, not intending to spare the kidnappers of the royal bride. The mercenary pulls out a knife, presses it to Lucina's throat, and declares that if anyone gets close to them, he will kill her. Håkon looks at his opponent in rage and tells Lucina to close her eyes. A moment later, with one powerful blow, the Dragon King knocks the mercenary's head off his shoulders. The man approaches the horse and asks Lucina if she is okay, because she is shaking so much. The girl saw that Håkon's entire face was covered in blood, but to her surprise, she was not afraid, but felt safe. Having cut the bonds on the bride's hands, the king wraps her in a cloak so that she can keep warm. Noticing that the girl has a fever, Håkon upsetly says that they set off in pursuit as soon as they noticed the loss, but apparently they were too late. The man hugs Lucina and asks for forgiveness for what she had to endure. Taking the bride in his arms, the king says that she needs to be patient a little. As soon as they leave the forest, the rain will stop. Turning to the soldiers, the man orders them to pitch tents and make a fire as soon as they leave the forest. Lucina clings to the king and thinks that she really feels good next to him and does not need to return to Berk. In a tent, Warming herself by the fire, a girl tries to wipe the blood from her face with a handkerchief. Looking at her reflection, Lucina notices that due to the heat, the spots have become brighter, and now she looks just like a sick person. The girl again wonders whether she should cure herself, but she is afraid of becoming attractive to the king. But remembering how Hakan held her close to him in the forest, Lucina suddenly thinks that maybe sleeping with him wouldn't be so bad after all. The girl finally decides to cure herself, but suddenly hears a voice asking her not to do this. Turning around, Lucina sees a small child standing in front of her. The kid looks closely at the girl and says that he is a forest elf named Fuka. The elf thoughtfully says that the girl speaks much better than he thought, because yesterday she was silent all day. Fuka says he followed the energy he first encounters in Thyre and asks if the girl has healing powers. The elf begins to shout that Lucina should not use her abilities so indiscriminately. If someone finds out about this, she will be in great danger. Fuka explains that the healing ability is very rare, and everyone will want to get it. The girl thanks the elf, and he notices that she has a very beautiful speech, and wonders why Lucina speaks so little. The girl sadly admits that she is afraid to speak in front of a large number of people, because they might get angry and hit her. Lucina notices that the elf is not a person, so she is not afraid of him at all. Suddenly, the girl admits that she has already met a large red dragon before. Finally able to speak without fear, Lucina tells a story from 10 years ago. Suddenly, the tent floor opens and Hakan asks permission to enter. Fuka quickly runs away, saying goodbye that they will definitely see each other later. The king enters and, looking at his bride, freezes, asking what is wrong with her face. Lucina embarrassedly tries to cover her face and mutters that it's all because of the fever. Hakan examines the girl and asks if she is definitely not sick. How can a fever cause such marks? Turning to Talon, the king orders to immediately bring a doctor. The warrior looks into the tent with interest and wonders what is happening there. Suddenly, Talon grabs the king and runs out of the tent, shouting that the king's bride has smallpox. The guy says that in the past, Brian's people brought a smallpox epidemic to Thayer, and the symptoms are very similar. Lucina tries to explain that she doesn't have smallpox at all, but that the spots on her face were caused by paint. Talon does not hear the girl and asks the ruler not to approach so as not to catch the infection. The girl tries to justify herself, but because of her excitement, she cannot express her thoughts normally. Suddenly, the warrior draws his sword, points it at Lucina, and orders her not to approach. The warriors in the camp begin to talk in fear, fearing that the king's wife has brought a fatal disease. Hakan tells Talon to calm down and put the sword away. They cannot be sure that it is smallpox. Turning to the bride, the king asks what she wanted to say. Lucina understands that if she doesn't start speaking normally, she will die, and tries to explain about the paint that contained sulfur and saffron juice. Talon, not understanding anything, says that the girl is delirious due to fever. Lucina stutters. The more worried she is, the less coherent her words sound. The girl recalls that for every word she said she received slaps in the face from the Baroness. And one day, Lucina overheard the maids talking that it would be better for the girl to keep her mouth shut in order to avoid punishment. The girl thinks that no one listens to her anyway, and she cannot speak clearly and coherently in such a situation. The warrior declares that everything is obvious, and they cannot take the girl to the palace. They must burn her and everything she touched. Talon states that the girl has the blood of people who insulted their graves, and that she should not have been saved at all. Lucina understands that if she doesn't do anything, she will die very soon. The girl calls on her power in hopes of healing the spots on her face. But suddenly, Lucina remembers Fuchs's words that if her abilities are revealed, many will want to kill her. Hakan stares at the bride and tells her to calm down first. The king declares that he will listen to the girl until he understands what she wants to say. But Talon objects that this is very dangerous. Turning sharply, Hakan confidently declares that his bride does not have smallpox. The king explains that with smallpox, the rash appears only after the fever subsides, and Lucina's symptoms appeared at the same time. Talon looks at the ruler in bewilderment and realizes that he is right. The king, to the girl's delight, says that with smallpox it is difficult to eat because of the nausea and rash around the mouth, and his bride has a very good appetite. Turning to Lucina, Hakan asks what she said about sulfur and dye. The Lord calmly notes that no one will touch his bride, so she needn't worry. Thinking about it, the king suggests that with the help of dye and sulfur, the girl could make a lightning hair dye. After calming down, Lucina reveals that the old king loves his hair like this, so the lady told her to dye it. Håkon looks at the bride and thinks that she, it turns out, didn't have this kind of hair from birth. The king points to Lucina and remarks that apparently too toxic paint caused such a rash on her face. Håkon suggests that Talon look at the fact that the rash is worst on the forehead and hairline. The king says that the inflammations that got wet in the rain only got worse from the moisture, which is probably what the girl wanted to say. Putting away the sword, Talon reports that toxic sulfur on contact can indeed cause such symptoms. Hugging the bride, Håkon states that if she had smallpox, he too would have to be burned because he touched and kissed her. The girl looks at the king with interest. He is the first person who seriously listened to what she said. Lucina muses that if she opened her mouth in front of anyone else, everyone would either get angry or laugh, but no one would listen to her. Håkon kindly says that the bride has a fever and she should not stand in the cold. One of the warriors comes into the tent and reports that the kidnappers have confessed to everything. The warrior continues that the mercenaries were following the orders of the Baroness and had to find and return her daughter. Furious, Håkon says that these people do not take Thayer seriously if they decided to do such insolence. The king says that he will immediately return to the castle and burn absolutely everyone, but suddenly, Lucina hangs on his arm. Turning around, the king says that he will not make an exception for anyone. Not only did they desecrate the graves, but now they dared to touch the king's bride. Realizing that the girl is not going to beg him for mercy, the man wonders if she would mind if he killed her mother and brother. Lucina doesn't know whether she should say that the Baroness is not her mother, and that she herself is an illegitimate child. The girl was the daughter of a woman very famous in the entertainment districts. With such a pedigree, she would not be married. Deciding that she needs to pretend to be the Baroness's daughter, Lucina falls to the floor and begs Håkon not to kill her mother and brother. Taking the bride by the hand, the king asks her to get up and not sit on the cold floor since she is sick. Taking the girl in his arms, the man whispers in her ear whether she will kiss him if he spares her family. Approaching Lucina's face, Håkon whispers that he cannot so easily forgive those who dared to attack the king's wife. Lucina answers her husband that if he spares her family, then she is ready to do whatever the king pleases. Looking into his wife's eyes, Håkon constantly remembers the child who saved him 10 years ago. Deciding that he no longer wants to torment his sick wife, the king once again asks her for a kiss. The man reminds that Lucina agreed to do whatever he wants, and he only asks for a kiss. The girl closes her eyes and reaches out to meet her husband, waiting for a kiss. Håkon orders the mercenaries to be beheaded, brought to the castle, and told that if anyone touches his wife, people, or land, he will burn them to the ground. The king orders antipyretics and light food to be served, and says that they will set out as soon as the fever subsides. Sitting at Lucina's bedside, her husband says that he will post guards in front of the tent so that she no longer has to worry. The girl thanks her husband, and he asks with a smile if she will give him another kiss as a sign of gratitude. Noticing Lucina's embarrassment, the king heads for the exit and wishes her a good rest. Hearing Håkon hum, Lucina wonders if her kiss made him so happy. Finally, the carriage enters the lands of Thayer, and Lucin admires the luxury that reigns around. The girl has heard more than once that Thayer is something like a cave, which is inhabited by backward barbarians who eat flying animals. The carriage stops. Talon opens the door and invites the girl to get out. Suddenly, Lucina smells a strange smell, somewhat reminiscent of a mixture of musk and sulfur, and it makes her feel very dizzy. Håkon explains that people with strong earth energy take time to get used to the smell of Thayer, who has strong fire energy. Lucina reflects that when she is in the arms of her husband, she feels safe. The king proudly asks what the girl thinks of Thayer's palace. Lucina honestly admits that the palace is very different from what she heard about it before. The king says with contempt that Brian does not recognize Thayer's race, including the dragon race, as people. The man says that due to prejudice, few people know that Thayer is the land of gold, and that it is the richest and most beautiful continent. Lucina looks around with delight and is amazed that she can live in such a place. The people around noisily welcome the return of their master. Behind those entering, whispers of people are immediately heard, wondering what kind of woman is walking next to their king. The old priestess folds her hands on her chest and, like the others, greets her master. The priestess notices in surprise that the king brought the energy of the earth to them and dips his hand into a bowl of water. The priestess looks intently at Lucina and extends her wet hand to her. The girl gets terribly scared and hides behind Håkon in horror, hoping that he will protect her. The king kindly explains that this is sacred water, and this is all done in order to cleanse the bad energy of outsiders. When Thayer's people leave the kingdom, bad energy clings to their body and soul, so upon their return they are cleansed with holy water. The man encourages his wife not to be afraid, because this is done for the purpose of greeting and not to harm. As holy water flows down the girl's face, she begins to feel as if the rash is getting smaller. After some time, the priestess says that she has completed the purification ceremony, so the king can enter the palace. Suddenly, in the palace, with a loud scream, a woman runs up to the couple and throws herself into the arms of the king. The woman confidently says that the ruler showed the greatness of their tribe to the ignorant people from Brian, and she is very proud of him. Lucina looks at the young woman in fascination. She is so beautiful and looks like a queen. Håkon politely thanks Carrot and claims that it is because she cares about him so much. The woman examines Lucina and asks in surprise if this girl is really a war trophy. The girl is ashamed to hear that she looks very dirty and should be washed immediately. The king states that he is sorry to report so late, but Lucina is not a trophy, but his wife from Berk. The carriages and maids listen to their master with great amazement and do not believe what they hear. Hugging his wife by the shoulders, Håkon says that the queen's place should not be empty for long, so Lucina will give birth to his child and become Thayer's queen. Carrot looks at the girl with disgust and declares that her whole body is covered in pus. The king begins to hastily examine his wife and asks in excitement if she is really wounded. Meanwhile, Lucina noticed that the dye began to wash off from her hair. Was this really how the holy water worked? Looking at his wife, the king notices the color of the hair and realizes that it was originally silver. Håkon calmly tells Carrot that Lucina does not have pus, but only paint, so she has nothing to worry about. The woman points her finger at the girl and asks if she can fulfill the obligation destined for her. Lucina looks at her husband in bewilderment and asks what kind of commitment Carrot is talking about. Håkon changes the subject and says that the girl should go and change her clothes. Turning to Carrot, the king orders a maid to be allocated for his wife. Without turning around, Carrot orders Titi to take the girl to the palace, to which the maid bows and assures the wife of the late king that she will do everything. While leaving behind the maid, Lucina turns around and now understands why Carrot behaves so freely. The girl is embarrassed. She initially thought that Carrot and Håkon were lovers, but it turns out that the woman is the wife of her husband's late brother. In the chambers, the maid politely bows and says that her name is Titi, and from now on she will serve Mrs. Lucina. The girl looks around the luxurious chambers, and the maid explains that until the lady gives birth to an heir, she cannot visit the queen's palace. Titi explains that once Lucina gives birth to the king's child, she will be able to marry him according to local law and become the official queen. The maid helps the girl change clothes, and Lucina thinks that the rash on her face really went away after the holy water. The girl asks Titi if she can still get holy water. The maid promises to go and find out. Lucina is left alone, and a small green bird immediately flies up to her and declares that the girl is behaving very intelligently. Seeing the girl's amazement, the bird takes the form of an elf who joyfully declares that he is Fuka. The elf notices that Lucina is doing the right thing by not using her abilities. The girl tells Fouquet that she will be better off in Thayer than in Berk. No one beats her here. The elf looks at the girl seriously and asks if the thought of having a child with Håkon frightens her. Lucina reasons that everything that is happening is strange, because according to Brian's laws, they are already married. But according to Thayer's laws, they are not yet married. Suddenly, the girl hears that Titi is returning, and Fuka instantly disappears. The maid happily reports that they were allowed to use holy water. Håkon is undressed by the maids. Talon enters and reports that the dragons have returned from Berk. The king asks whether his order was carried out, to which the warrior says that the Baroness and her son were terribly scared. Talon asks the ruler in bewilderment if he will really forgive the inhabitants of Berk just like that. 10 years ago, assassins were sent to the lands of Thyre, and the king was unable to take revenge on the one who killed the previous king. Talon fears that after everything that has happened, the people of Brian will look down on the Thyrites. Håkon furiously says that he won't leave anything like that, but first he needs to find out something. The king reminds the warrior of how 10 years ago, hit by a black arrow, he fell into the forest and his life was saved by a girl on Berk's territory. Talon notices that after so many years, the girl has long grown up, and perhaps she still lives there. The king states that he wants to kill all the people there, but he wants to spare this child's life. The warrior asks with interest why the ruler didn't take the child with him then. Her healing powers would have served the Thayers. The king remarks that it would be anything but grateful to take the child who saved his life away from his family. Håkon remembers silver hair and eyes, but judging by the scars on her face and her ugly appearance, she must be the daughter of a commoner or servant. The king orders Talon to find this child before the attack on Berk is carried out. Lost in thought, Håkon orders information to be found about whether Lucina is the Baron's biological daughter. Håkon reflects that for a noblewoman, his wife is too shy and distant from the family. Talon thoughtfully asks if the Baroness really deceived them and slipped in a simple girl. After thoroughly washing herself in the hot spring pool, Lucina is pleased to notice that the paint has completely washed away. Suddenly, the girl hears footsteps and, turning around, sees with fear that Håkon is entering the hall. The girl hides behind a column, and the king, not noticing anyone, calmly undresses and enters the water. Lucina is completely confused and does not understand what to do next in this awkward situation. Suddenly, Håkon notices that silver hair is developing in the water behind the column. The king is surprised that a woman was brought into the pool without his order. Håkon loudly asks who is hiding there, but Lucina covers her mouth with her hands and does not respond. The king angrily thinks that Talon has sent another girl to seduce him. Håkon loudly asks who ordered the woman to come here. Lucina is completely lost and realizes that if she doesn't do anything, her husband will see her. Unable to think of anything better, the girl takes a deep breath and dives into the water. Håkon laughingly remarks that he will not allow the uninvited guest to simply escape. Sitting underwater, Lucina watches in despair as strong male legs approach her and decides to swim away. Angry, Håkon asks how some maid can create so much trouble and run away from the king himself. The man grabs Lucina by the hand and abruptly pulls her out from under the water. The king threatens the girl to tell Talon that his tricks will not go unnoticed, but falls silent without finishing. Having looked closely, the king recognizes his wife in the lying girl with beautiful silver hair. The man looks closely at his wife, realizing that without paint, she is strikingly similar to that same girl. Håkon continues to look at his wife and thinks that everything fits in age. Liuchina at this time looks at the expression on her husband's face and is afraid that now he will beat her. The girl, in despair, asks the king for forgiveness, says that she was wrong, and begs him not to beat her. Håkon listens to his wife in bewilderment and says that she has not done anything wrong to him. The girl falls to her knees and declares that she will do anything, just don't let them beat her. Håkon puts on his robes and, sitting in front of his wife, declares that in his palace, no one will lay a finger on the girl. Lucina asks if the king himself will beat her, but the man once again says that she has not done anything wrong. Håkon wonders what the girl is doing here. She admits that she wanted to wash herself with holy water. Patting his wife on the head, the king admits that he decided that the maids had ignored his order, which is why he got angry. Running his hand along the girl's cheek, the man sincerely asks her forgiveness for scaring her. Leaning towards his wife, the king says that after the birth of the child, she will become a queen, so she should not show her weakness to anyone. Helping Lucina to her feet, the king declares that his queen must rule the palace with dignity. Håkon thinks that the girl who saved him was very brave and was not afraid of anything, and Lucina is afraid even of her shadow. Obviously, that girl's social status was not high at all. Moreover, if Lucina had healing powers, she would have cured her rash so that no one would think of smallpox. Finding herself too close to her husband, the girl once again asks for forgiveness. Grabbing a lock of hair, Håkon playfully asks where Lucina is going to go. Hugging his wife tightly, the king notices that she has not yet bathed. The girl again begins to tremble with fear and assures the man that she is already finished. Håkon picks up Lucina in his arms and suggests that in this case they leave the pool together. When his wife asks where he is taking her, the king calmly replies that he is going to his bedroom. Seeing his wife's reaction, Håkon asks in surprise if she is still afraid of him. Titi examines the lady's hair and says that their king will certainly like this color. Other maids doubtfully ask whether the girl's body can handle such a burden. Laughing, one of the girls remarks that the lady is too fragile and will simply die after a night with the master. To Lucina's surprised question, the maids explain that she will not be able to withstand the greatness of the dragon race. Titi abruptly interrupts the maids and declares that her mistress will certainly handle everything. Leading Lucina out of her chambers, the maid declares that she will give birth to a beautiful child and become a queen. No one should doubt it. The collected and well-groomed Lucina enters the king's chambers and blushes deeply with embarrassment. Håkon says that the girl is very beautiful and invites her to come closer. Examining his wife's curls, the king wonders why she hid such beauty behind that vulgar dye. Lucina thinks in embarrassment that for the first time in her life she was called beautiful. Suddenly, Håkon leans towards his wife's ear and quietly asks if she will lose consciousness again if he kisses her. Without waiting for an answer, the man presses his lips into the girl's, and she is surprised to realize that she feels softness and warmth. Noticing Lucina looking at the designs, Håkon says that the tattoos represent the designs of the tribe he was born into. The king puts the girl's hand on his chest and says that she does not need to be afraid if she wants to touch them. Lucina is surprised to realize how hard the guy's body is. It's as if she's touching a stone. Håkon asks his wife if she will run away and suggests spending the night together. The man carefully lifts Lucina and places her on the bed, hovering over her. But then images of the maids and their conversations about the fact that she might die appear in the girl's head. Closing her eyes, Lucina begins to shake, thinking that she does not want to die. Noticing his wife's fear, Håkon silently moves away and gets out of bed. As if reading the girl's thoughts, the king calmly says that he is not angry. Suddenly, Lucina is asked by her husband if she would like to return to her family in Berk. Without thinking for a minute, the girl confidently says that she will not return back. Lucina declares that she will bear Håkon a beautiful child and become his queen. Turning around, the king asks if the girl knows what it means to be Thayer's queen. Håkon says that the wife should be ready to give her life for him and Thayer, and asks if she is ready for this. Without waiting for an answer, the man puts on his robe and says that he will touch the girl until she is ready for it. As he leaves, the king says that Lucina can rest here, and he will sleep elsewhere. A few days later, all the maids were gossiping that the king had left his wife alone in the chambers. Suddenly, Lucina heard in a conversation that the king wanted to marry Miss Carrot. The girl turns around in amazement. Her worst fears are confirmed. The ruling Thayer dynasty has a marriage custom according to which, after the death of the older brother, the younger brother continues to live with his wife. In addition, Lucina heard that the young king had long been in love with Carrot, even during his brother's life. Several more days passed, but after that night, Lucina and Håkon did not see each other again. Titi tried to calm the lady down, telling her that the king was away, and when he returned, he would immediately come to her. Lucina desperately reasons that if Håkon is really in love with Carrot, then she has no chance. Suddenly, a joyful Titi runs into the chambers with a loud cry. The maid reports that the king has finally returned and asks if the lady would like to greet him. In the corridor, Lucina runs into Carrot, who remarks that she did not recognize the Bryan maiden because of her hair. Lucina bows her head and mutters greetings to the Queen of Carriages. The woman mockingly says that she doesn't understand a word of what the girl is mumbling. Carrot states that if Lucina speaks in such an idiotic manner even in bed, then her king must surely be annoyed. Grabbing the girl's hand, Carrot says that she is too skinny, and even if she has a relationship with the king, she will not stand it for long and will die. The woman confidently says that now is the best moment for Lucina to escape, because she did not come here of her own free will. Seeing that the king's wife is surprised by the words about death, Karen asks in bewilderment if Håkon didn't tell her about it. The woman says that Thayer's palace is a mausoleum for women, and it is difficult to find one who will survive after receiving the dragon's energy. Carrot states that if Lucina wants to survive, then she needs to give up her vain dreams. Suddenly, the king's voice is heard, wondering what the girls are talking about, looking with suspicion at his wife's upset face. Carrot bows respectfully before the ruler. Lucina, looking at her, repeats after her. Carrot notices that it is impossible to talk to someone who cannot say words normally. She was simply giving advice, like an elder in the palace. The woman says that not everyone can become the partner of the great dragon, and such a weak and timid woman is throwing away her own life in vain. Carrot tells an astonished Håkon that he must make sure he chooses the right partner for himself and Thayer. The king thanks for the advice, but assures that he can handle it himself, and calling Lucina, leaves. Walking through the courtyard, Håkon explains that he has been busy lately, so they haven't seen each other. Seeing that the girl is upset, the king asks if there is something that is causing her discomfort. Lucina hesitates, and Håkon asks if she wants to tell him something. The girl realizes that she has a lot of questions, but she doesn't know where to start. Lucina cannot gather her scattering thoughts into a heap and mutters something about death and the queen. Håkon, not understanding anything, is afraid that he said something last time that scared his wife. The man says that becoming a dragon's partner is very risky, and it is clear that Lucina, who was brought by force, does not want to die for the king and Thayer. With a grin, Håkon notes that for the girl there is no difference between him and the king of Brian. Suddenly, Lucina grabs her husband's hand and passionately assures him that there is a difference. The girl admits that Håkon is the only one who really listens to her and has never been angry with her. Håkon, in bewilderment, asks if he understood his wife correctly, and she nods in the affirmative. The king is surprised and says that Lucina is the only daughter of Baron Burke, so why then no one listens to her? The girl realizes that she almost let it slip and thinks that she shouldn't admit her origins. Håkon realizes that the girl was clearly a hated daughter. Otherwise, she would not have been sold to the old king as a concubine. The man presses a lock of hair to his face and says that if he had such a beautiful daughter, he would listen to everything she says, because the girl is very sweet. Suddenly, an excited Talon runs up to the couple and reports that something has happened. The king looks at the warrior in bewilderment, and he reports that Adar has disappeared. Sighing, Håkon says that he will come now and solve the problem. The man apologizes to Lucina and says that he needs to go urgently. The girl looks thoughtfully at herself in the mirror and wonders if Håkon really thinks she's cute. Remembering Carrot's words, Lucina turns to the maid and asks what it means to receive dragon energy. Titi wonders if the king did not tell his wife anything, then whether she has the right to do this. Deciding not to risk it, the maid says that receiving energy means conceiving and giving birth to a child for the dragon. When asked by the lady why everyone is talking about death, Titi replies that mothers of dragons often die during childbirth. Lucina muses that Carrot thinks she is too skinny and therefore might die. The maid says that giving birth to a dragon child is not easy, so the one who gives birth to an heir becomes the queen. The great Queen Carrot was a poor maid in the past, but she was able to give birth to the first king's child and became queen. Lucina happily understands that if she is only required to give birth to an heir, then she need not worry about her past. Titi confidently declares that her mistress will definitely give birth to a beautiful child and become a queen. Suddenly, Titi starts rummaging through the boxes and declares that the lady needs to wear sexy clothes to attract the king. Sitting at his mother's bedside, Håkon says she was surprised by his trip to Burke and scared that he had to go to war. Adar was once a great queen who was able to give birth to 2 dragon sons and receive the blessing of the fire god. 10 years ago, the queen was so shocked by the death of her son that she lost her mind and refused to acknowledge his death or bury him. Håkon's brother is in the Kozak, a sacred cave that has preserved his body for 10 years. The mother selflessly takes care of her son and believes that he will wake up and open his eyes. Standing up, the king sadly looks at his mother and tells Talon that they need to return to the main palace. On the street, the warrior wonders if his master would like to visit the palace with his bride. Håkon does not want to, but Talon begins to shout that by his behavior, the king will ensure that the women in the palace will tear each other to pieces. The warrior claims that Håkon must give life to his children, and if he does not like Lucina, then he must pay attention to Carrot. The young man says that 10 years ago, the crown prince got into a bloodbath and was killed. The king is silent, and Talon continues that if something happens to him, the line of the guardian dragon will be interrupted. Håkon coldly remarks that he has found a partner and does not understand what else Talon wants from him. The warrior notes that giving birth to a dragon is very difficult, so the first king spent his life among countless women. Exploding, Håkon shouts that he doesn't want to watch so many women slowly die. The king continues that Carrot managed to give birth to a son, but before that, many women died after spending the night with their brother. The guardian dragon does not give birth to daughters, and women of other races cannot withstand the power of his fire, so they die. Håkon states that people must accept death, but he cannot indiscriminately drag women into his bed. Riken told Håkon that most people simply sold their daughters to the palace. So many girls were scared and cried while going to the bedroom. The king says that his brother fell in love with Carrot because she was the only one who was not afraid of him. Talon asks in bewilderment why the ruler shouldn't marry the woman, especially since she herself wants it. The warrior reasons that Carrot already gave birth to a son once, which means she can do it again, and it will be for the benefit of the ruling Thayer dynasty. The king remembers Riken saying that as soon as he met Carrot, he immediately realized that she was born for him. The brother admitted that he really loved her and wanted her, so that they can be buried together. The brother assured that Håkon should also meet a woman who would not want to become a queen, but would simply love him. Emerging from his memories, Håkon declares that he does not like Carrot. Talon shouts that the ruler doesn't like either Carrot or Lucina, and he no longer knows what to do with all this. The king looks thoughtfully into the sky and ponders why dragons must take so many women's lives for the sake of reproduction. Talon notes that if it weren't for the dragons, the other bestial races would have been enslaved because the Bryans treat them like animals. The people of Bryan look down on the beastmen races and consider them barbarians. Enemies do not encroach on Thayer's lands only because they are afraid of the dragon race, which has the power of fire. Talon assures that without the power of the guardian dragon, it would be impossible to protect the inhabitants of these lands, and Håkon himself knows about this. The young man says that while the first king was alive, Håkon could afford such childish behavior, but now he needs an heir. Håkon sighs heavily and asks what to do if Lucina dies. Talon does not understand why the king cares so much about the girl, because she himself was going to kill her. The warrior notes that if Lucina had fallen into the hands of Bryan, she would still have died, and if she has such a fate, then it is better to use it for the benefit of Thayer. The young man frankly says that this is not the worst fate for Mrs. Lucina. Lying in bed, the girl hears Titi's words that the king is coming. The door opens. The king enters with glasses and wine and wonders if his wife is still sleeping. Håkon approaches the girl and speaks that the more he looks at her, the more beautiful she seems to him. The man wonders if the girl was sad because he hasn't been in the palace lately. Deciding not to wait, Håkon hugs his wife to him and kisses her tenderly on the lips. Lucina realizes that she doesn't feel scared. Instead, she realizes that she feels incredibly good. The girl says that she wants more. Her husband picks her up and carries her to the bed. The husband puts Lucina on the bed and asks if she is ready to risk her life for him. Suddenly, Lucina looks up and asks if she's really cute. Håkon replies with a smile that everyone who looks at the girl will say the same thing. Suddenly, Lucina forcefully pushes the king away and asks him about Madame Carrot. Håkon does not understand what his wife is talking about, but she reports that Carrot is also very beautiful. Having made up her mind, Lucina asks if her husband likes Carrot, to which the king replies that now he is with Lucina and with no one else. The girl thoughtfully says that everyone is talking about the fact that the king will soon marry Madame Carrot. The king asks his wife to stop talking about the other woman, but she does not listen to him. Angry, Håkon says that if his wife talks about the woman again, he will get up and leave. Lucina says that her husband did not refute anything. In comparison with Carrot, she is clearly losing, and all the compliments are just lies. Håkon angrily remarks that he asked his wife to stop, but apparently she really wants him to leave. Without waiting for an answer, the man stands up abruptly and says that if Lucina does not want to be his wife, then just say so. Carrot laughingly asks the girls if Håkon really left Lucina and never came to the palace anymore. The maids say that the girl must not have wanted to have physical contact with a representative of a wild tribe, as they are considered in her lands. The woman happily says that the king hates boring women and will soon lose interest in the girl. Carrot notes that she was surprised that Håkon personally chose Lucina and brought her here, but now it is quite obvious that there is nothing to worry about. The maids obsequiously say that the king will be disappointed in the girl and will make their Lady Carrot the queen of Thayer. The woman remembers how Håkon, as a child, constantly spied on her and Raken. Carrot is sure that Håkon always wanted her, but turned his back because he could not bear the guilt. The woman is sure that the ruler will soon return to her, and the place of the queen will rightfully belong to Carrot. The king no longer came to Lucina, and Titi assured the girl that the king was simply very busy. Lucina, in despair, thinks that everything happened because she could not say what she wanted and angered her husband. The girl asks the surprised maid to help her and teach her to speak normally. The girl tries to explain that she wants to learn to speak coherently. Titi says that when she first started learning Thayer, it was also difficult for her, and she had to practice a lot. Lucina is surprised that the maid is not from Thayer. She was sure of the opposite. Titi says that she is from the neighboring lands. She was told that if she became a maid in the palace, she could pay for the education of her brothers and sisters. Continuing to practice, Lucina asks how old Titi's brother and sister are. She answers that they are 13 and 15. Concentrating, the girl, almost without stuttering, says that she also has a brother, but they are not close to him at all. Suddenly, a maid enters the mistress's chambers and says that the wife of the late king is calling her. Lucina turns around in fright, not understanding what Carrot wants from her. Approaching Mistress Carrot, Titi repeats what she taught her mistress. The former queen reports that there will be a royal celebration soon, and the outfit from Burke looks like Lucina has nothing to wear at all. Carrot presents the girl with an outfit, telling her to put it on and join the party. Titi dares to notice to the lady that the black outfit is too reminiscent of mourning. Carrot calmly asks Lucina if she doesn't feel sorry for the master who sewed this outfit especially for her. Looking at her rival, Karen coldly tells her to put on her outfit and get out of her chambers. The woman states that Lucina may consider this outfit a gift that was given to her out of pity. Looking at her mistress, Titi angrily notices that at the festival, everyone will be in bright outfits, and simply no one will notice Lucina. The maid desperately says that the mistress may be misunderstood. They will think that she is in mourning for her dead relatives. Lucina realizes that if Håkon thinks as Titi says, then he may never want to see her again. Suddenly, a very strange woman comes into Lucina's chambers and says that she is hungry. The mistress asks who it is, but the maid says that she herself does not know because she has not been living in the palace for so long. Meanwhile, Otter wonders why the white girl is wearing mourning clothes. Finding out that it's a party outfit, the woman offers to help, but Titi interrupts and asks who she is. The woman says that her name is Lita, and if she is given food, she will fix her dress. Titi tries to remember where she heard the name Lita. It seems to be similar to Queen Ader's handmaiden. The woman starts screaming. Lucina tells the maid to bring her food. The maids tell Carriage that Mrs. Ader tricked everyone again, escaped from the cave, and came to the palace. The woman reflects that the mother-in-law could well have gone to the Burke girl's chambers. Carrot decides that she will figure everything out on her own. There is no point in bothering the overlord over such trifles. Having received food, Lita pounces on it greedily, as if she had been starving for a long time. While Lucina and Titi were distracted, the woman grabbed scissors and began to cut the dress. Noticing what the uninvited guest is doing, the girls are horrified and don't know what to do with her. Twisting the scissors in her hands, Lita reveals that she can make an outfit that will make anyone instantly lose their head. Looking at Lucina, the woman says that if she wants to stand out in black, then she needs to do her makeup and hair. The carriage and the maid stand at the slightly open doors. The girl asks the mistress in bewilderment what they need to do. Turning around, Carrot says that they don't need to do anything and notes that she hasn't felt so happy in a long time. Lucina, horrified, wraps herself in a blanket and declares that she would never wear such an outfit to a party. Titi tries to pull the cover off and declares that the outfit is amazing. Looking at herself in the mirror, Lucina realizes that the outfit is too open and revealing for her. In the ballroom, the king wonders where his wife is. Talon replies that she is late and asks if he needs to bring her. Carrot comes up and notices that it must be difficult for Lucina to see her ruler. The woman says that the girl might have been afraid that the king would want to take her to bed again, but even this is not an excuse for being late. Hakan orders Talon to tell Lucina that if she does not want to attend the banquet, she can remain in her chambers. Carrot, watching the king, notices that the ruler is in a bad mood and, throwing off his cloak, offers to entertain him. The woman declares that she will dance for the great King Thayer. Watching the dance with delight, Talon notices that Carrot has always been good at dancing. Lucina and Titi stand in front of the ballroom and ask the guard why they can't enter. The warrior reports that only those who are wearing the outfit donated by Mrs. Carrot can enter the hall. Titi assures that her mistress is wearing exactly the same outfit. It's just been slightly altered to fit her figure. The man remembers that Mrs. Carrot wanted to mock the girl, but Lucina looks even sexier than the mistress herself. The warrior decides that he cannot let the girl in like this and forcefully pushes Titi aside. The girls fall to the ground, and the warrior decides that the king himself treats Lucina coldly, which means he doesn't have to stand on ceremony. The girls don't know what to do. If they don't enter the hall, the king will misunderstand everything. When the girls were completely desperate, Lucina suddenly noticed a small green bird. Hakan, listening to a familiar melody, drinks wine and plunges into memories. One day, Carrot danced in the same way, and Raken told his brother that the girl reminded him of a red poppy. Looking at the girl with adoration, Raken said that for the sake of such a flower, it would not be a sin to die in love. Raken was a great warrior who united Thayer and received the title of Great King. Everyone loved and respected the first king. His brother worshipped him and admired everything he had: weapons, wife, and throne. When Raken was mortally wounded, his only desire was to see his Carrot at least once more. According to Thayer's laws, Hakan had to sleep with Carrot, and if she bore him a son, then he had to marry her. The king could not be with Carrot because she was actually in love with his brother. When leaving, Hakan said that he would find another queen, and Carrot could be free from obligations. The woman tried to stop Hakan and said that she loved Raken like a king. Carrot admitted that as a man, she always loved only Hakan. What he heard greatly amazed the man. He believed so much in sincere love between his brother and his wife. Not noticing the king's reaction, the woman says that she will definitely give birth to an heir and become queen again. The king grabs his head. As soon as he plunges into these unpleasant memories, his head begins to hurt badly. Suddenly, the man looks up and sees a beautiful vision that reminds him of a black butterfly. Looking at Lucina, Hakan thinks that it's as if moonlight illuminated their oasis, and is surprised to realize that he even lost his headache. Lucina asked Fuku to help her, and the little bird hit the guard in the face with its droppings. While the guard tried to fight off the bird, Titi told Lucina to take this chance and enter the hall. Standing in front of the king, the girl gathers her thoughts and remembers everything that her faithful maid taught her. Bowing, Lucina greets the great king and wishes him happiness and prosperity. Hakan looks at his wife in surprise. Is this really the modest Lucina who doesn't even know how to speak coherently? Carrot, in a rage, asks the guard why he let Lucina into the hall. The man asks for forgiveness for being distracted. Hiding his admiration, Hakan notices that his wife was quite late. Titi asks the Lord for forgiveness and explains that the delay was due to an incident. Suddenly, the king notices bruises on his wife's arms, and the maid says that the guard did not let them inside and even hit the mistress because of the prohibited outfit. Hakan turns to Carrot in amazement and suspiciously asks what this other forbidden outfit is. Carrot, realizing that he was caught, slaps the guard in the face and loudly asks how he dared not let the lady into the hall. The woman asks the king for forgiveness, saying that there was a misunderstanding and she will seriously punish the culprit. The king enragedly declares that what happened is simply unacceptable and orders Talon to hand over his sword. Approaching the guard, Hakan will declare that he dared to hit the king's wife, showing disrespect for the owner of the palace and all of Thayer. Lucina tries to stop her husband and assures that everything is fine with her. Approaching his wife, the king declares that in this palace, no one can touch her except himself. Håkon says that disdaining Lucina means being Thayer's enemy, and they will pay for this insolence with their lives. Carrot, feeling guilty, remarks that today is the day of the royal festival. So is it really necessary to shed blood? Turning sharply, Håkon asks if it was Carrot's idea to keep Lucina out of the hall. The woman reflects that she has not seen the king since the day the girl refused intimacy, so she decided that he had lost interest in her. Realizing that there is no longer any point in going against the king, Carrot declares that she could not do this to the king's wife. Without looking at the guard, the woman says that she only told him to be careful, but he obviously decided to interpret the order in his own way. The young man listens in horror as the mistress asks the ruler to cruelly punish him. Håkon turns Lucina away from the people and asks her to close her eyes and ears and not open them until he tells her. A moment later, the king orders the body to be thrown into the Valley of Fire and the hall to be put in order. Taking his wife in his arms, the king informs everyone that the holiday is over and orders them to disperse. Leaving, Håkon says that he will be in the palace with Lucina and orders not to disturb them. In the chambers, the king carefully tells his wife that everything is fine now and she has nothing to worry about. Håkon worries that the girl might be scared because a person died before her eyes. Lucina admits that she is scared, but thanks her husband for doing this because of her. The man asks for forgiveness for yelling at the girl last time. He had long wanted to apologize, but could not find the words. Lucina cuddles up to Håkon and says that she would also like to apologize for being stupid and angering her husband. The girl admits that she wanted to find her master and apologize, but she was afraid that she would say something wrong again. Håkon puts Lucina on her feet and tells her that he doesn't want to scare her again. If she is afraid to go to his bedroom, then he will take her back to the castle. The girl takes the king's cape with her hand and says that she wants to stay with him. Looking up, Lucina honestly admits that she still doesn't know if she's ready to die for her husband. The girl enthusiastically explains that she needs to get to know her husband as a person before deciding to give her life for him. Håkon laughs and remarks that they really don't know each other at all. The man declares that the girl is stunningly beautiful today, and as soon as she entered the hall, he forgot about everything in the world. Lucina doubtfully asks if the ruler liked her outfit. Leaning towards his wife's ear, Håkon says that the outfit is simply stunning, but asks the girl not to wear it again. The king explains that he doesn't want others to see his wife like this. Only he can look at her. Noticing that the girl's skin shines against the background of black fabric, Håkon cannot cope with his emotions and kisses his wife. The girl jumps away from the man and states that today she just wanted to talk to him. Håkon pours wine into glasses and invites Lucina to sit next to him. The girl sits opposite, and the king asks what his wife would like to know about him. After drinking wine for courage, Lucina asks how old the king is. Pouring more wine, Håkon says that by human standards he is 27 years old, so he is not much older than his wife. Remembering Tidi's advice, Lucina wonders what her husband likes and what he is interested in. Noticing that his wife has finished another glass, the man says that it is Thayer wine and offers to pour another. Lucina drinks wine with pleasure. She really likes its taste, and she also noticed that the more she drinks, the less nervous she becomes. Håkon is surprised to notice that his wife drinks much better than he thought. Stroking his wife on the cheek, the king says that he also has many questions, and he hopes that the girl will be able to answer them honestly. Suddenly, Håkon invites Lucina to play an interesting game. The king explains the rules. If a girl wants to answer a question, she answers. If she doesn't want to answer, then she drinks wine. Håkon decides that he will start first and asks what kind of men Lucina likes. Seeing his wife drinking a glass of wine, the king laughingly invites her to ask a question. Looking into her glass, Lucina sheepishly asks what kind of girls Håkon likes. The man replies that he wants to meet a girl who will love him as Håkon, and not as a great king. The king asks his question whether the girl always spoke so well. Lucina admits that she used to speak poorly, but once in the castle, she practiced a lot. The girl says that the maid helped her. She didn't want to talk like a fool in front of her king. Håkon is flattered by his wife's words and says that Lucina did a very good job. The man reflects that the girl seemed small and timid to him, but in reality she turned out to be much stronger and braver than he thought. The king reflects that her original bold personality turned timid after she was abused. Hakan wonders if the girl was beaten in her family when she was little, and if the girl ran away from home. Lucina reflects that status doesn't seem to matter in the castle, but Hakan might think she's dirty if she finds out that her mother is a vicious woman. Suddenly, Lucina declares that the Overlord's question is invalidated because it is her turn to ask. The girl was silent for a while, and then made up her mind and asked what her husband thought about her. Hakan directly says that he likes his wife, and it seems to him that the more he looks at her, the greater his attraction. The man affectionately says that he does not want to hurt his wife. He just wants to make her his queen and spend many years together. Leaning towards Lucina, the king declares that he wants to hug her now and fall asleep hugging her every night. Approaching the girl's face, Hakan asks what she, in turn, thinks about him. Looking at her reflection in the glass, Lucina says that sometimes she was a little scared. The girl confidently says that now she doesn't mind sleeping with Hakan at all. Lucina notices that her husband has a very beautiful body, and she is embarrassed when she looks at him, and she is also afraid that he will sleep with someone else. Suddenly, the king pulls Lucina towards him and kisses her tenderly on the lips. Hugging his wife tightly, Hakan promises her that in the future, he will share his bed only with her. The man reflects that he cannot hide the secret forever from such an honest and brave woman. Hugging his wife, the king declares that he has something to tell her. The man says that guardian dragons have fiery energy, and few women are able to cope with it. Once a woman has a child with a dragon, in most cases they get sick and die, but in severe cases the woman may stop breathing even during intimacy. Hakan admits that as soon as he developed feelings for his wife, he was afraid that having learned the truth, she would reject him and want to leave. The king understands that he acted cowardly and will understand if Lucina wants to return back to Berk. Hakan fearfully awaits an answer, but for some reason, Lucina does not say a word. A lot of wine and the warmth emanating from her husband completely exhausted the girl, and she simply fell asleep, not hearing what her husband admitted. The king puts Lucina to bed, carefully covering her with a blanket. The man looks at his wife and says with embarrassment that he really doesn't know what to do with her. The maids sadly tell Karetz that the king and Lucina spent the whole night in the royal chambers. The woman thinks with anger that this is the first time in her memory that this has happened. Lucina dreams of a huge, hard, and juicy apple, which she hugs tightly. The apple attracts the girl so much that she can't stand it and opens her mouth to take a bite. Running her hands over Hakan's chest, Lucina opened her mouth, about to bite his chest, which she imagines to be an apple. Opening her eyes, the girl moves away from the man in horror, amazed at what happened. Lucina looks around in bewilderment and tries to understand where she is and how she ended up here. Pressing her hand to her forehead, the girl remembers that she and Hakan drank wine and talked yesterday. After making sure that her husband is asleep, Lucina quietly gets out of bed, intending to leave unnoticed. At the royal chambers, Talon and Titi are worried that the lady has not yet come out, fearing the worst. Suddenly the door opens and Lucia comes out, suffering from a severe hangover. The servants rush to the mistress as fast as they can, asking if she is all right. The girl asks Titi not to scream like that, because she is in great pain, thinking that she obviously had too much wine yesterday. The maid asks how much pain Lucina is in, thinking about how she survived the night with the king. And the lady replies that she can't even walk, thinking about the severe hangover. The servants are amazed that such a fragile girl could withstand the power of her master, and Lucina only thinks about her sore head. The girl doesn't quite understand what the servants are talking about. They probably know how much wine she drank yesterday. The mistress's head is so ringing that she has difficulty speaking and quietly tells Titi that she needs water. Talon tells the maid to escort the lady who will bring prosperity to Thayer. Entering the chambers, the warrior greets the lord and notices that he is in a good mood. Talon says the king's face is just shining. He must have had a good night. The man remembers Lucina's words about how handsome he is, and Hakan asks the surprised Talon if it is true that he has the most beautiful body. Hakan reveals that his wife told him about it, and remarks that Lucina was incredible last night. Talon joyfully shouts that the master did a great job, and now Lady Lucina will give birth to a dragon child. The warrior informs the king that he has learned that he was ordered by his master. The The warrior says that in addition to Lucina, he found 2 more people with silver hair and eyes. Talon reports that one girl recently died of illness, and the other was an orphan and was taken to the temple by Brian's people. Moreover, the warrior adds, Baroness Burke is not Lucina's biological mother. Talon says that the girl's mother was a famous high-class courtesan who was known to all the aristocrats of the capital. There are rumors that the woman was killed by a conspiracy of noble ladies whose husbands were bewitched by her. Talon learned that when Lucina was little, not a single day passed without wounds on her face, and she was treated worse than a maid. Håkon understands how difficult it was for his wife and asks the warrior not to spread this information, and he himself will pretend that he knows nothing. Talon states that in Thayer, it does not matter whether a girl is a slave or a prostitute. The only important thing is whether she can give birth to a dragon or not. The king says that his wife is from Brian, and she may be ashamed of her origin, but he does not want to complicate her life. Håkon states that from now on, Lucina's life will be filled only with happiness and joy. Suddenly, Talon wonders how long the Overlord is going to keep Raken's body, and whether it's time to bury him. The warrior says that the king's mother is not herself. The ministers may regard the situation as a violation of the body, and then Lady Otter's position may be in danger. The warrior confidently says that the previous king should find peace next to his ancestors. The young man asks, before a new queen appears in the palace, to pay tribute to the past king and establish new laws. Suddenly, Talon changes the subject and states that Titi took the lady to the pool and asks if the king would like to join her. Håkon thoughtfully replies that he and Lucina need to finish the conversation they didn't finish last night. The king looks around in confusion, but does not see his wife in the pool. The man goes deeper into the room, pulls back the curtain, and sees the maid combing Lucine's hair. The girl notices her husband and greets him joyfully, shyly covering herself with a robe. Lucina asks her husband for forgiveness because yesterday, without understanding how, she fell asleep. Håkon gently pats the girl's head and remarks that it was nice to watch his wife sleep. Suddenly, the king notices that Lucina's hair is still wet and offers to help dry it. Titi instantly hands the towel to the master and declares that he will wait for the mistress outside the door. The man sits down on a chair and invites the girl to sit down too. Lucina notices that there are no more chairs, and her husband calmly invites her to sit on his lap. After thinking a little, the girl carefully sits on the king's lap, feeling awkward. Håkon asks if his wife is okay, because after drinking so much wine, she must have a bad hangover. The Lord says that the wine from Thayer is very insidious. When you drink it, it remains sweet on the tongue, but when you wake up in the morning, the wine becomes your worst enemy. Suddenly, the man hugs Lucina to himself and admits that she is like wine to him. The king says that he is ready to look at the girl's face all the time, but as soon as it disappears from sight, he begins to get bored. Håkon reflects that Lucina had a hard time living in Berk, and then he forcibly took her to a foreign country. How can one then count on her being able to give him her heart? Looking at his wife, a man thinks that he does not want to make her suffer, and therefore must tell her the truth. Håkon gently asks if the girl can come to his room tonight. The king declares that he wants to tell his wife something important, but this time they will do without wine. Coming out of the pool, Håkon tells Titi that she did a very good job and helped the lady learn to speak well. Turning to the servant, the king orders that the maid be given a bar of gold as a reward for good service. Titi bows deeply and warmly, thanks the Lord for the honor shown to her. Håkon declares that Lucina will come to him for dinner in the evening, and from now on, this will happen every day. The king tenderly kisses his wife's hand and says that he needs to go, but they will definitely see each other in the evening. One of the maids tells Carrot the latest news and states that now the king intends to spend every night in bed with his wife. From another servant, the woman learns that the priest has set a day for the funeral of Riken's body, which means that the former queen will be expelled from the palace. After thinking a little, Karen orders the surprised maids to call Galai. Titi flies with happiness, because thanks to the gold received from the ruler, she will be able to pay for the education of her brothers and sisters. The girl emphatically states that Lucina did a great job yesterday and behaved well in front of a lot of people. Squeezing her mistress's hands, the maid says that she will help her show herself just as well today at dinner with the king. Titi enthusiastically begins going through things, wondering what would best suit Lucina. At this time, the girl is wondering who the elderly woman was who helped her so much. She left so quickly that Lucina did not have time to thank her. Suddenly, the girl notices Fuku sitting on the window and looks around, looking for the treat prepared for the elf. While treating the bird, Lucina says that she is glad that she isn't there. Everyone seems nice and friendly to her, and she is no longer afraid of people. Fuka looks at the girl thoughtfully, thinking that not all people in the kingdom are nice and kind. A young man enters Carriage's chambers. The maids greet Mr. Galaya with embarrassed laughs. The man bows before the former queen and wonders why she called him. Carrot reports that the priest has set a day for Raken's funeral, which means that she will not be able to stay in the palace. Describing the prospects, the woman wonders if her brother wants her to end her life the same way as Adar. The young man replies that he and his sister, once in the palace, enjoyed honors longer than they deserved. With his head down, Gilai says that now that the king has a partner, they should step aside. The young man does not have time to finish, and a cup thrown by an angry sister flies at his head. Carrot stands up, leans on the table, and with a threat in his voice invites his brother to repeat what he just said. The sister approaches her brother and asks thanks to whom he remained alive, who had been ill since childhood and had no talent except a beautiful face. Carrot states that she ran errands at the market, cared for the young man when he was sick, and even brought him books he wanted to read. Carrot quietly says that his brother did not think about the fact that those books were bought with money that should have been spent on food. Looking into Jalayu's face, the sister asks if he wasn't the one who said he always wanted to repay her kindness. Carrot admits that thanks to her brother's ingenuity in eliminating her rivals, she was able to enter the palace as queen. Grabbing Gilay by the hair, the sister asks why, after everything he has experienced, he decided to betray her. The young man trembles with despair and assures his sister that he did not intend to betray her. Gilay clutches his chest, bending over in pain, and says that his pain is like the influence of black magic. The sister angrily says that every time she asks her brother for help, he justifies this pain. The young man hears that Carrot spent her youth and best days trying to raise him to his feet, and he believes that his well-being is more important than herself. Hawkins sits at a set table and goes through various phrases that can be used to start an important conversation. The king clutches his head in despair, realizing that everything is wrong and he cannot find the right words. There's a knock. The door opens and Lucina enters the room, from whom the man cannot take his eyes off. The king jumps up, fussily invites the girl to sit down, and says that he does not know whether she will like the ordered dinner. Lucina, not paying attention to Hawkins' worries, quickly approaches him, hugs him by the neck, and kisses him tenderly on the lips. The wife admits that they saw each other in the morning, but it was already evening and she managed to miss her husband. The embarrassed king asks how long the girl trained to say this phrase. Suddenly, the man's face takes on a serious expression, and he declares that he has something important to say. Suddenly, Talon bursts into the room without knocking and says with alarm that they have big problems. The warrior reports that Mrs. Ader's madness has manifested itself again, and they urgently need to go to her. Lucina hears with alarm that the king's mother refuses to leave the body of her eldest son, and no one can calm her down. Hakan leaves, turning around. He asks Lucina for forgiveness and promises that they will definitely continue the conversation later. In the corridor, Lucina and Titi notice a young man. The maid says that this is Gilai, the younger brother of the former queen. The girls look at the young man and notice that he is clearly unwell. Suddenly, Gilai falls unconscious on the floor. Lucina, without a doubt, immediately rushes to his side. Examining the guy, the girl realizes that his heart has stopped, and if she doesn't use her power right away, the young man will die. Lucina understands that she must help the patient, but is afraid that her abilities will become known. Turning to Titi, the girl tells her to call someone for help, and she will stay behind to look after Gilay. Lucina carefully looks around to make sure that no one is nearby. Having laid hands on the young man, the girl understands that his illness is very serious, and even with her magic, it will not just go away. Gilay, at the same time, feels as if his heart is about to break, and decides that for the sake of his sister, he must pay for the sins he has committed. The sister took care of her brother, despite the fact that everyone said that the boy would soon die. Gilai felt that he could continue to live if he became useful to his sister, and hoped that one day he could be free from this pain. Suddenly, the young man feels that his pain disappears. The sacred moonlight pours on him, as if washing away all his sins. Opening his eyes, Gilly sees a blurry silhouette of a girl who asks if he is okay. The girl holds the guy by the head and is happy that he has finally come to his senses. Gilai stares at Lucina, deciding that this is a holy maiden. The young man sits down and realizes that he does not feel pain at all. But how could this happen? Because he felt that his heart was stopping. Gilai says that Lucina healed him, but the girl tries to justify herself and says that she was only looking after him. The guy reflects that even the best medicines that his sister obtained did not make him feel better, but now his pain has been cured. Gilly grabs Lucina's hand and asks if she has healing magic. The young man notices that the girl is from Brian, and the priest from there have divine power, capable of even reviving the dead. Gilly grabs Lucina by the shoulders and declares that she must also have such power. The girl frightenedly breaks away from the young man's hands and says that everything is completely wrong. Lucina reports that Titi went to call the priest, and she herself stayed with Gilai, fearing that something might happen to him. The young man is sure that the king's wife healed him with the help of divine power. Otherwise, his pain would not have gone away so quickly. Suddenly, the young man asks if it's a pity for the girl to waste her abilities like this. Gilly states that with such a gift, Lucina can survive anywhere on the continent, and she has chosen to become a dragon's wife instead. Suddenly, an idea comes to the young man's head, and he tells the girl that she should run away right now, and he will help her with this. With a smile, Gilly reflects that thanks to Lucina's gift, he will be able to live longer without suffering from heartache. Again, grabbing the girl by the shoulders, Gilai invites her to come with him. They will leave the palace and be able to live freely. Lucina does not understand what the young man wants from her and resolutely declares that she is Hakon's wife and will not go anywhere. Gilai angrily asks what is the point of all this if a girl loses her life trying to become a queen. Lucina is amazed to hear that it is very painful to die with a guardian dragon child inside of you. The girl is amazed by Jalaya's words and asks what it all means. Gilly smiles, struck by a hunch, and says that it means Hakon didn't tell her anything. Ader, threatening with a weapon, orders no one to come near. If anyone touches her son, she will kill everyone. The warriors notice that the woman is holding a black arrow that can kill the dragon, so they should be careful. Ader shouts that her son is not dead. He just fell asleep and will definitely wake up soon. Suddenly, Hakon runs into the room and convincingly asks his mother to calm down. Seeing her younger son, the woman begins to scream that it was he who killed Raikon. Because of him, his older brother died. Hakon lowers his head in horror, and the priestess shouts that the lady must come to her senses. Raikon was killed by a fighter. But Adar frantically shouts that the arrow hit Raikon precisely because of Hakon. Only he is guilty of his brother's death. Lucina stares at Gilly and asks him to explain what Hakon did not tell her. A young man talks about what it means to spend the night with a dragon and give birth to his child. Nosha declares that it was no coincidence that the king took as his wife a girl from Brionne who insulted their tombs, because if she dies, then it is not so terrible. Gilai says that the king protects the women of Thayer, which is why he took the girl here so that she would suffer a painful death instead. Lucina listens in despair that if the king had told her everything right away, she would have rejected him. The girl is completely confused, and Gilly adds that she should not be mistaken, because Hakon is simply using her. Shouting that her son's enemy must die, Adar plunges the tip of his spear into Hakon's chest. The woman shouts that her brother was always jealous of Raikon and did only bad things, and after he killed him, he took the wrong place. The warriors pull the mother aside. Talon orders holy water to be brought immediately and asks if everything is okay with the ruler. Hakon hears nothing except the words of his mother, who demands that he be released in order to finish what he started. Adar puts the equipment on his son and says with a laugh that Hakon wants to repeat everything after his brother. Raikon looks at the boy and declares that now, if he himself falls on the battlefield, his brother will be able to defeat the enemies in his place. Otter asks not to say such things to the child, but the brother notices that at his brother's age, he defeated the leader of the wolf tribe. The woman strokes her son's cheek and says that Riken is a great king, and does he really think that his brother is the same? The priestess cleans up the king and notices that, fortunately, the wound is not deep. The healer says that the cave is a sacred place, and if Hakan stays in it, he will be healed naturally. The king stands up with a gloomy face and orders no one to follow him because he wants to be alone. Lucina does not want to believe what she heard. She does not believe that Hakan could use her. Wiping away her tears, the girl decisively says that she must ask the king everything. Gilai notices that the ruler is a monster who brought the girl by force. So does she really think that he will tell her the truth? Lucina reasonably notes that she is seeing Gilai for the first time, and he too can deceive her. Leaving the guy alone, Lucina turns sharply and runs away. After some time, the girl finds the king and declares that she needs to talk to him. Suddenly, Lucina notices a wound on her husband's body and says that it urgently needs to be healed. The man turns around abruptly and declares that he doesn't want to talk to anyone right now. Putting his hand on his wife's shoulder, Hakan wearily says that they will discuss everything later. Lucina grabs the king's hand and says that he is bleeding. His wound must be treated quickly. Hakan rather rudely grabs the girl's hand and tells her to stop now. The man, holding back his anger, says that he is not in the mood to talk to the girl right now. Lucina is not going to give up and declares that she will not go anywhere because she needs to talk to her husband. Taking the king's hand, the girl says that she wants to hear what her husband wanted to tell her at dinner. Exploding, Hakan grabs his wife's hand and says he orders her to leave. Titi says that when she was looking for the priest, she found out that he had gone to the cave to bury Riken, and something must have happened there. The maid asks the lady not to worry so much and assures that the great king will return soon. Lucina sadly tells Titi that she wants to be alone and asks the girl to leave. After a while, Gilly comes up to Lucina and asks if she has considered his proposal. The young man says that, judging by the expression on the girl's face, she did not have a simple conversation with the king. The guy sits down next to Lucina and asks why she hid her strength from everyone. The girl denies everything, and Gilly notes that the girl must simply not want to be pestered by everyone just like him. The guy says that Lucina does not know her worth. If he had such a gift, he would not die in order to give birth to a child for a dragon. Lucina asks not to speak ill of the king, and Gilly does not understand why she is still on the side of the one who deceived her. Looking the young man in the eyes, Lucina confidently says that she still doesn't know for sure whether everything is as her interlocutor tells her. Suddenly, Gilly notices that Lucina likes Hakan and asks what she sees in someone like him. The girl admits that her husband is the first person who listened to her and said that she was sweet and beautiful. Turning to Lucina, Gilly remarks in surprise that he can do this too. The young man declares that if this is only the case, then he can say such words as much as he wants. Looking intently at Lucina, the guy admits that as soon as he opened his eyes, he thought that there was a saint in front of him. Gilly extends his hand to the girl and says that he will not allow anyone to sell her or take her by force, and again offers to run away together. Sitting in his chambers, Hakan drinks wine. There is a knock on the door, and they say that Mr. Garrett is asking for an audience. The king shouts in rage that he gave the order not to let anyone into his chambers. Talon peeks out from behind the door and calmly wonders if he really isn't allowed to see the great king. The warrior notices that, according to the priest, the ruler left the cave without finishing the treatment. The wound has not yet healed, and the king is pumped up with alcohol. Hakan advises his friend to shut up, because such a scratch cannot harm the dragon. Talon says that the dragon is not easily wounded by ordinary weapons, but black arrows can kill even the guardian dragon. Enraged, Hakan asks what the warrior thinks he should do, other than lock his mother in prison. Talon calmly remarks that the overlord must at least do this if he does not want Otter to be sent to the Valley of Fire. The man is perplexed to hear that everyone believes that the woman should be sent to the Valley of Fire because she vowed to kill the last guardian dragon. The warrior embarrassedly says that at first Otter did not allow Riken's body to be buried for 10 years, and now she is threatening the king's life. The ministers will not leave it all that easily. Hakan is furious and shouts that Ader is his mother, and everyone else must have gone crazy. Talon admits that he is sorry to say this, but the lady can no longer play the role of the king's mother. Looking at the sword pointed at him, the warrior continues that the ruler should not protect his mother. He needs to make a cold-blooded decision. Hakan threateningly declares that if Talon does not leave now, he will kill him. Left alone, the man remembers his mother's terrible accusations and, in a rage, destroys everything that comes to his hand. Hakan thinks in despair that if he had died on that terrible day, then his mother would have been happy. Suddenly, the king notices that everything is blurry before his eyes. His head is incredibly dizzy, and he falls unconscious on the floor. Hearing Jelia's words, Lachina notices that upon hearing the confession, her heart does not flutter as before. Hearing such words from Hakan, the girl felt that her world had been turned upside down. Lucina stands up abruptly and decisively declares that she needs to go to her king. Gilly asks in bewilderment what a girl could like in a guy who hasn't even talked to her properly. Lucina replies that she is coming to him not because she feels sympathy, but because the ruler is wounded. The guards keep hearing knocks on the door and shouts that the woman must avenge her son. Adar shouts that Hakan shot a black arrow at Raken. She saw it herself. Suddenly, the woman notices that a small toy bear has fallen at her feet. Leaning towards the toy, Adar's head seems to clear, and she says that Hakan did not kill Raikon. Clutching the toy to her chest, the queen remembers that her older brother died protecting his younger brother, as he always promised. Looking at her hands and remembering what happened, the woman is already wondering what she has done. Adar rushes to the door, shouts that she was not herself, and asks to let her see her son. Carrot enters his brother's room and says that the mad Adar attacked Hakan after seeing visions caused by Gillet. The woman notices that the mother is the king's weakest point, and after what happened today, he will not even dare to think about burying his brother. Gilly replies that there is a lot of talk among the ministers that Mrs. Adar should be sent to the Valley of Fire. The sister says with a grin that many people left the palace thanks to her brother's black magic, and now he suddenly began to fear Adar's death. Carrot is not sure that Hakan will have the courage to kill her mother, because even after the scandal, instead of sending her to prison, he just locked her in the palace. In his delirium, the king notices that he is again in the forest. He wants to get up to fly away from danger, but his wings do not move. The dragon realizes that he needs help, and suddenly sees the little girl with silver hair again. Lying her husband's head in her lap, Lucina notices that his wound has caused him to develop a fever. A girl wonders if she can trust a man and stay close to him. Deciding that in any case she cannot watch her husband suffer, Lucina puts her hands on her chest and begins to heal. The king sits down, holding his head, and does not understand what happened to him and why he ended up on the floor. Hakan wonders if he was really in so much pain that he saw that strange dream again. The king touches his chest and suddenly notices with surprise that his wound has completely disappeared. In the morning, leaving his chambers, Hakan meets Talon, who says that he has brought the priestess so that she can examine the Lord. Suddenly, the warrior notices with joyful bewilderment that the great king's wound has healed. Hakan turns to the priestess and asks if she came to him at night to heal him, but the priestess nods negatively. Turning to Talon, the king asks if he washed his wound with holy water. Hakan reflects that the wound from the black arrow could not have gone away so quickly, especially since he was very feverish. The priestess explains that the Lord is a guardian dragon, and therefore recovers faster than ordinary dragons. The king asks the guard who came to him at night, and receives the answer that Mrs. Lucina was in the chambers. Hakan recalls his delirium, and comes to the conclusion that all this was not a dream. The guards at the queen's palace notice that not a sound has been heard from the chambers for a long time, and decide that they need to take a look. Opening the door, the warriors see an open window and realize that Mrs. Ader has escaped again. Titi runs into the room and happily says that she borrowed a book from the priests about the history of Thayer and the generation of dragons. The maid says that since Lucina becomes queen, she will be interested in learning this information in advance. Lucina opens the book, thinking that if it describes the history of dragons, then she can check if Gilai's words are true. The girl frantically begins to turn the pages and realizes with annoyance that there is not a single picture in the book. The Baroness never taught her stepdaughter to read. She even learned to speak on her own. The lady looks at Titi and asks if she can read the book. The maid says that the book is written in ancient dragon script, so she won't be able to read it. Suddenly, the same woman who helped Lucina with her outfit for the holiday enters the room screaming. The girl runs up to the guest and greets Mrs. Lita, but the woman looks at the girl in confusion, not understanding who she is talking about. The old woman declares that her name is not Lita, and that she came because she was looking for Hoku. Suddenly, Adar picks up the book and joyfully says that she wrote it herself. The woman says that she wrote a book to read to her sons, and Hoka taught her letters from it. Adar says that the letters look quite complicated, but if you know the principle, you can learn to read quite quickly. Adar sits down on the sofa, calls Lucina over and says that he will teach her to read. Hakan muses that if it was Lucina who healed his wound, then she was the girl who saved him 10 years ago. The king wonders why, in this case, his wife hid her healing power from everyone. The man comes to the conclusion that if others noticed such a gift, then everything could become much more complicated, because everyone would be glad to have such power. Suddenly, approaching Lucina's chambers, the king hears the cheerful voice of his mother. Adar calls the girl Haka and says that soon she will be able to read as well as her older brother. Hakan looks at the women in amazement. 10 years have passed since he saw his mother smile so kindly. The girl gently tells Adar that her name is not Haka, but Lucina. The girl notices that the old lady was looking for some hockey when she came here and asks who he is. The woman looks at the girl in confusion and begins to mutter about haiku and realizes that she does not remember what she should do next. Hakan decisively enters the room and asks with interest what the women are doing here. The man, confused, asks why someone who should be locked in his chambers is here. Lucina stands up, greets her husband, and reveals that Addie taught her to read. The girl states that the woman had already visited her before and even helped her. Lucina notices that Addie is a very kind and nice person, but it looks like she is looking for someone. Suddenly, Ada runs up to her son and says with relief that she has finally found him. The mother looks at her son in despair and says that she does not understand how she could hurt him with her own hands. The maid reports to the carriages that, as the woman ordered, they left the window open, through which odor escaped. The girl says that the king's mother left the room and went to the main palace, and the great king went there too. The woman enters her brother's room and asks him if everything is ready. Gilly says that Mrs. Ader is already in an unstable state, and he is afraid that if he puts more pressure on her with black magic, she will no longer be able to come to her senses. The sister grabs her brother by the head and declares that this woman opposed her marriage to Hakan and tried to throw the queen out of the palace. Carrot angrily says that even if Ader comes to her senses after the ritual, she will have to give up her last spirit. The woman throws her brother to the floor, pushes the bowl towards him with her foot, and declares that he must do what he started. In desperation, Gilai pours the potion into the prepared container, realizing that he does not have the strength to resist his sister. At the same moment, Otter's gaze becomes clouded, and she begins to see pictures that never existed in reality. The woman sees a girl with silver hair aiming a bow straight at her son. Otter grabs the feather and, shouting how she could encroach on her son, rushes at Lucina. Hakan manages to grab his mother at the very last moment, saving his wife from a fatal blow. Pushing Adar aside, the king rushes to his wife and anxiously asks if she is all right. The mother does not calm down and screams in rage that this creature killed her son, and it will not calm down until it tears her into pieces. Holding Lucina close to him, Hakan shouts menacingly that the criminal is wandering around and there are no guards anywhere. The man furiously reflects that his wound was not enough for his mother. Adar lost the most precious thing because of him, and now wants to take revenge by taking away the most precious thing from her son. With tears in his eyes, Hakan thinks that he wanted to remain a son, and if everything could only end with his blood, then he would just try to forget about it. Watching how the warriors twist the mother, the king orders the criminal to be sent to the Valley of Fire. In desperation, Hakan shouts that the king and his wife have been attacked, and it is time to put an end to it. Turning to Titi, the king orders the priestess to be called because Lucina was injured. The husband sadly says that his wife was injured because they neglected to protect the criminal. But this will not happen again. Talon enters the chambers and asks if the Great King really intended to send Adar to the Valley of Fire. Hakan calmly replies that the minister should feel better if the man threatening the last guardian disappears. The warrior asks in surprise whether Lady Lucina will not be upset that because of her the king's last relative will be doomed to death. The Lord calmly replies that his wife does not need to know about everything, and he gave the order to everyone to remain silent about it. From now on, all information about Adar will be hidden, and talking about it is prohibited, and violators will be punished. Gilai realizes that due to the use of black magic, he lost consciousness again, and tries to figure out how many hours have passed. The young man asks the passing maids if anything happened while he was sleeping. The girl answers that it happened, but the king forbade talking about it. Gilai looks at the departing maids in confusion and thinks that something significant must have happened since it is forbidden to talk about it. Suddenly, the young man is suddenly grabbed by his clothes, and Lucina, turning him towards her, declares that she wants to ask him something. The girl tried to find out about the woman who attacked her, but Titi told about the king's order. Lucina asks Jelaya if he knows the woman that Hakan sent to the Valley of Fire. The young man covers his mouth with his hand in horror, not understanding what the girl is talking about. Grabbing Lucina by the shoulders, Gilay asks if Hakan ordered Lady Adar to be sent to the Valley of Fire. Lucina replies that the king ordered the punishment of a woman who lived in a separate palace. Gilar reflects in despair that he never thought that Hakan would sentence his mother to death, and it was all because of him. Lucina asks if the young man knows this woman, or if he too cannot tell anything because of the order. Gilly doesn't have time to say a word when Hakan's shout is heard from the side, calling his wife. The Lord is furious and asks what Gilly was doing with his wife now. In one leap, the man finds himself next to his interlocutors and sharply grabs the young man by the clothes. Hakan states that Gilly must be seeking death if he dared to touch Lucina. The girl looks at the ruler in fear and tries to explain that everything is not at all what he might have thought. Seeing that her husband is not reacting to her words, Lucina tries to push him away from Gilly, urging him to calm down. Turning to the young man, the girl declares that she wants to talk to the king alone. Turning to Hakan, the wife asks if it is true that when their bodies join, she can die. The girl asks if this is the reason the king chose her instead of the Thayer girls, but said nothing, fearing that she would run away after learning the truth. Hakan tries to justify himself, assuring that he did not think of hiding anything from her and really wanted to tell her. Suddenly, Lucina turns away sharply and begins to cry. The king helplessly reaches out to his wife. The girl breaks free and declares that she doesn't want to talk to Hakan now. Looking after his wife, the king sadly thinks that he is already accustomed to women running away from him. The man is used to letting girls go and forgetting them, but for some reason, refusing Lucina causes him great pain. The girl was the first to smile at him sincerely and without fear and came close. Lucina was like a dream that he had seen since childhood, and the man believed in what he had previously considered impossible. Hakan believed that with Lucina, he could find what Raken had once told him about. The king presses his hand to his chest and clearly understands that he really fell in love with Lucina. A girl walks through the yard and suddenly hears a soft shout calling her name. Turning around, Lucina notices Jelaya standing nearby, who presses a finger to his lips, calling for silence. The girl notices a bruise on the young man's neck, and with a grin, he invites her to cure it. Gilai says they need to rescue the woman who was sent to the Valley of Fire by the king. With amazement, Lucina learns that that woman is the mother of the great king. The young man says that since Adar is still the mother of the king, they will not throw her in the valley, but will imprison her in a fiery prison. Gilly upsetly reports that the woman will not last long in prison because she is already old. Taking Lucina by the shoulders, Gilai declares that he knows how to get into the valley, and if the girl helps him, they can save Mrs. Adar. Fuka clutches her head in horror, not believing that Lucina is going to the Valley of Fire. The elf screams furiously that the girl has lost her mind while he was away. Lucina asks Fuku not to make noise, so as not to attract attention, and declares that she must do this. The girl turns to the elf and decisively declares that she needs his help. Lucina watches the guards while holding the key Gilai gave her. The young man said that he would deal with the guards without any problems, but a problem might arise with the gatekeeper guarding the prison. Having learned that if Gilai puts the guard to sleep, he will not be able to leave his room. Lucina resolutely declares that in this case, she will go herself. Fuka tries to dissuade the girl from going where it is clearly very dangerous. Lucina replies that she cannot send Mrs. Adar to death, and she is not doing this for her sake. Despite the fact that the girl is angry with her husband for hiding the truth from her, she cannot doom him to such torment. The lady shows the elf a bag of peanuts and honey and promises to feed Fuku them every day if he helps her. Noticing that the guards have begun to fall asleep, Lucina realizes that the time indicated by Gilai has come. Climbing the huge stairs, Lucina notices a cage at the very top and decides that she needs to go there. Continuing to rise, the girl notices that it is getting hotter and hotter. Suddenly, Fuka points to a huge sleeping monster and says that this is the prison gatekeeper. Lucina notices that Gilai managed to put the monster to sleep, but they should not hesitate. Approaching the cage, the companions see Adar, who is sitting unconscious and tightly clutching a toy. Having opened the lock of the cage, the girl and the elf hardly pull the old woman out of it. Lucina says that the woman's body is very hot, and she needs to be taken to a cooler place as soon as possible. The girl gives the elf a bottle and asks him to wipe Adar and give her water, and at this time, she will try to heal her. To Fuki's protest, Lucina remarks that they came here to save a person, so it is necessary to use her gift. Gilai says that only with Lucina's help can they save Lady Adar. Officially, the woman is imprisoned in the fire prison for a day, but if she holds out, she will then be sent to the Valley of Fire. The girl hears that only she and her healing abilities can save Adar. Lucina notices that even with the use of healing power, the woman does not recover, perhaps due to her age. Suddenly, the friends hear a loud roar, and turning around, see with horror that the gatekeeper has woken up. The young man warned that if he fainted from pain, the gatekeeper would wake up. Gilai hands the girl a bag and explains that if you throw salt at the monster, it will blind him. Fuka releases the vine and shouts to Lucina that she needs to hurry up because he won't be able to stop the monster for long. The monster tears the vine, hitting the elf. Fuka flies straight at Lucina, causing her to drop the bag of salt. Suddenly, the girl realizes that she is very dizzy, probably because she has been using her magic for a long time. Noticing the monster's huge paw approaching her, the girl realizes that she will soon die. Suddenly, Håkon stands between the monster and the girl and holds his huge fist from hitting him. The king calmly orders the gatekeeper to return to his place and continue guarding the prison. Turning to his wife, the ruler shouts in anger, not understanding what the girl was thinking when she walked here. Reeling from weakness, Lucina hears that she almost put her life in danger because of one sinner. Håkon continues to scream, but suddenly notices Lucina kneeling down and rolling her eyes. With the last of her strength, the girl whispers that she does not want her husband to end up in eternal hell. Håkon picks up his unconscious wife in his arms, and at the same time Adar comes to his senses, but calls the king Riken. The woman strokes her son's hand and says with a smile that she has been waiting for his arrival for a very long time. Adar hands Håkon a toy and persistently asks him to take hockey with him. The woman hands over the toy and declares that it is very dangerous here. The son should take his partner, Haka, and leave. The mother hands her son a toy that she sewed herself, and the boy enthusiastically asks what he should call it. Adar says that when Håkon was in her belly, she called him Hoki, which is a great name for a toy. The mother assures that her son needs to leave as soon as possible and adds that she will get out of here herself. Adar says that he will not survive if something happens to Hoki, so the son, at all costs, must first protect his brother. Håkon recalls that many years ago, Riken actually made such a promise to his mother. To the king's great regret, his brother was able to keep his promise, but only at the cost of his life. From the flood of memories, Håkon, looking at the toy, cannot hold back his tears. Suddenly, the fog in Ader's head clears, and she realizes that her youngest son is sitting in front of her. The woman approaches her son and begins to ask him for forgiveness, explaining that she is old and constantly out of her mind. The mother hugs Håkon and bitterly asks how it was possible that she did not recognize her son. Fuka, watching this scene, is relieved to note that, thank God, no one died. Carrot asks in bewilderment how Mrs. Adar was able to get out of the Valley of Fire alive. The maids say that in addition to this, the king also calmed down and withdrew his order of non-disclosure. Carrot listens thoughtfully that once the old woman is restored, she will live in the inner palace. Sitting at his wife's bedside, Hakan admits that if it weren't for her, he would have done something irreparable. Lachina takes her husband by the hand, and he urgently asks her not to do this again. The king says that if he lost Lucina, then real hell would come for him. The girl sits up in bed and says that after what happened, she realized something. The wife admits that no matter how angry she is with her husband, she does not want to see Hakan suffer. Lucina states that even if she has to put her life on the line, she doesn't want her husband to get hurt. Squeezing the king's hand, the girl decisively declares that she wants to give birth to his child. Hakan is so stunned that he asks his wife to repeat what she just said. Lucina says her love for her husband is so strong that she is willing to risk her life. The girl decisively declares that she is going to give birth to a child for the king and become his queen. Without allowing her husband to come to his senses, the girl quickly runs up to him and passionately kisses him on the lips. The man abruptly pulls his wife away from him and asks her to stop. Hakan reminds that the intercourse of their bodies can put the girl's life in danger. Lucina replies that she is well aware that many mothers die in childbirth. The girl continues that despite the risks, Mrs. Ader and Mrs. Carrot were able to give birth to children. Lucina hopes that with her healing magic, she can do this too. Without allowing the husband to come to his senses, the wife deftly flips him onto his back and sits on top. Lucina tries to take off her husband's clothes, but he jumps up in fear and pushes her away. The king declares that they cannot rush so much because the girl could still die. Hakan says that he doesn't know what his wife decided to do, but he is not ready to lose her. The man admits that he was incredibly scared when he saw Lucina in the Valley of Fire. Holding the girl close to him, the ruler says that he doesn't even want to think about the fact that he might not have had time to save her. The husband begs Lucina to treat her life as carefully as possible. The girl is wondering whether she should tell her husband about her gift, especially since Gile already knows about it. Lucina notes that Thayer needs an heir, but she hates the idea of another woman bearing Hakan's child. The king firmly states that first of all, they need to check the girl's health. The husband notices that his wife has already lost consciousness several times, and with such a body, it is dangerous to have even an ordinary child, let alone a dragon. Lucina reflects that having healing magic, she never thought about whether her body was healthy. The girl faints every time she uses the gift for a long time. Does this mean that she is not strong enough? The priestess reports that the lady does not have any serious illness, but there is a lack of nutrients. Lucina becomes incredibly embarrassed when the priestess asks if she had a bad diet as a child. Hugging his wife, Hakan wonders if his wife will feel better if she eats better. The priestess states that she needs to examine the mistress more carefully because the people of Brian are different from dragons in many ways. The priestess respectfully says that as soon as the results are ready, she will immediately inform the overlord. When the priestess leaves, Lucina sheepishly admits to the king that she is an illegitimate child. The girl says that the Baroness is not her mother, but the real one was a famous butterfly in the capital. Sadly, the wife admits that she lied because she was afraid of a negative reaction from the king. Taking his wife in his arms, Hakan declares that he will not leave her until she herself rejects him. The husband admits that he also did not tell the girl the truth about the birth of the dragon because he was afraid that she would reject him. Leaning towards Lucina, the man promises not to hide anything from her from now on. The priest rejoices that Mrs. Ader has come to her senses. She recovered so quickly, as if she had truly been blessed by fire. Suddenly, the woman's head begins to flash through the pictures that she saw while unconscious. Ader understands that all this was an illusion that arose under the influence of black magic. Sitting up abruptly, the woman extends her hand to the priest and declares that she urgently needs to talk to Hakan. The king says that the mother blamed herself first of all, and therefore was angry with her son, mistakenly thinking that he was behind the murder of Raikan. Hakan admits that if it weren't for Lucina, they would have lived their whole lives with this misunderstanding. Lucina notes that it would be more convenient for her to speak if her husband would put her on her feet. The king states that, according to the priestess, his wife's body is weak, which means she should not overwork herself. The warrior greets the great king and reports that Lady Ader has finally woken up. The couple come to the king's mother, but she has already fallen asleep again. Carrot enters the room with a tray and reports that Mrs. Ader just recently fell asleep. The woman says that it will take more time for her mother-in-law to fully recover. Carrot states that he wants to take Lady Adar to the Queen's palace and take care of her as required by law. Lucina turns to Hakan and says that she too could take care of Adar. Carrot irritably says that according to tradition, the previous queen should be courted by the current one. The woman reproachfully says that Lucina has spent so much time in Thyre, but has not even studied the banal laws. The husband hugs Lucina and says that there is no need to rush into this. The laws can be learned after she becomes a great queen. The king notes that Carrot, who knows the laws so well, must remember that after the birth of the child, she herself will have to honor the queen. Hakan tells Lucina that he will bring her books on the culture and laws of Thyre. The girl will slowly read them and ask about everything that she does not understand. The girl is embarrassed and thinks that even if her husband gives her books, she still won't be able to read them. Carrying Lucina, Hakan remarks that the girl has nothing to worry about. The books are written in the common language of the continent. A warrior approaches and informs the great king that the ministers have arrived for the tribal meeting. Leaving, Hakan tells his wife that they will definitely see each other soon. Lucina happily notices Gilai walking down the corridor towards her. The couple sits on the steps, and the girl asks how the young man is feeling after their adventure. The guy replies that everything is fine. Gilai says he heard about Lucina fainting and asks how she is feeling. The girl admits that most likely the fainting was due to the fact that she overdid it with the healing, but now everything is fine. The young man thoughtfully says that this is the first time he has heard that divine powers have a side effect. Gilly says that healing is one of the characteristic divine abilities and is inherited from priests. But Lucina assures that she did not have such in her family. The girl admits that as a child, she wanted the wounds to heal, and that's exactly what happened. But she hid it from everyone. Gilly listens with interest to Lucina's story and advises her to continue hiding her abilities. The young man assures that if the sick find out about her gift, they will flock like bees to honey. And if the girl refuses them, they will begin to hate and curse her. Suddenly, Lucina turns to the guy and notices that if she tells everything to Hakan, he will protect her. Gilly thinks that of course the husband will protect his wife, and she will be able to give birth to a child without any problems. And then he will find another use for her powers. If Lucina gives birth to an heir for Hakan, she will become a great queen. And Gilai will be forced to live with his possessed sister as a black magician. The young man understands that he cannot allow the girl to tell about her gift, especially to Hakan. Gilly advises not to trust the king, because if he has to choose between his wife and Thayer, he is unlikely to choose her. With surprise, Lucina hears that for the ruler, she is just a person from an enemy country, brought in order to give birth to a child. Remembering all the wonderful words that her husband said to her, the girl declares that she is not sure of Gilay's words. The young man confidently says that Lucina knows nothing about Hakan. Such a lover of war as the king will gladly take her to the battlefield to help treat the wounded. Lucina calmly replies that she would be happy to be with her husband all the time. Gilai asks in amazement why she likes the king so much. The girl irritably replies that these are just her feelings. With surprise, the guy thinks that when he first met a man who treated her well, the girl immediately lost her head. The young man imagines that Lucina met him first and immediately gave him her heart. Lucina notices how the interlocutor's face has changed and asks if everything is okay with him. Embarrassed, Gilly chalks it all up to a pain in his heart and says that in any case, it is better for the girl to hide her gift. The guy scares Lucina with the fact that a war might break out over her possession, and then her dear Hakan might be in danger. The girl changes the topic and says that her husband brought her various books, but she does not know how to read. Lucina admits that she did not tell the king about this because she was afraid that they would laugh at her. The young man looks carefully at the girl and says that he can teach her to read and write. Titi states that it is a great fortune to have such a brilliant teacher like Mr. Gilai. The maid says that the young man learned the common language on his own at the age of 6, and at 15, he already knew all the possible written languages of the continent. Titi admits that she is very jealous of the lady because there is no one in the palace more educated than Gilai. The The girl says that she did not have the opportunity to study because she was forced to earn money to educate her brothers and sisters. With amazement, Titi hears Lucina inviting her to study together. The lady notes that she will be very comfortable studying with Titi rather than alone. The maid rushes at her mistress, shouting that meeting her and serving her turned out to be the greatest luck in her life. Gilly recalls that Lucina suggested studying once a week. The young man thinks that learning to read and write is not so difficult. But if he spends time with the girl, there may be a chance that they will run away together. Entering his sister's palace, the young man notices Carrot at Otter's bedside, who reproachfully says that he has finally appeared. Gilly, confused, asks why Lady Adar is in the queen's palace. The woman ironically asks if, by law, she should not take care of the king's mother. Carrot's face changes and tells her brother that her mother-in-law has come to her senses. Nosha hears with horror that Otter caused a commotion, saying that there is a black magician in the palace and asked to call Hakan. The sister notices that her brother's magic causes terrible visions, but the moment the vision ends, it disappears from memory. Most people don't understand what's happening and run away, thinking they've gone crazy. Carrot continues that old woman Ader, surprisingly, lasted 10 years without escaping. It seems that she developed immunity and remembered everything that was done to her. Carrot says that she has obtained a sedative that will cause drowsiness and contribute to the loss of control over thoughts. The brother is somewhat relieved to hear that his sister is going to mix the drops into Otter's food, and they should change their target. Carrot states that their target will now be none other than Lucina. Gilly shouts in horror that under no circumstances should this be done. Angrily, the sister asks whether his brother will again hide behind the pain in his heart. The young man says that it is unknown how black magic will affect the man from Brian, what they will do if Lucina remembers everything and tells Hakan. The brother notices that the girl is not as old as Ader and asks what they will do in that case. Carrot admits that his brother is right and he needs to think things over carefully. Coming out of the meeting, Hakan asks Talon whether his mother was transferred to the queen's palace without any problems. The warrior replies that he expected Mrs. Otter to be stubborn, but she calmly followed Mrs. Carrot. Talon notices that after leaving the Kozik, the mistress's behavior changed noticeably, so maybe it was being next to her dead son that had a bad effect on her. The king understands that there is a reason in the warrior's words and replies that everything is possible. Hakan says that many took his injuries as a bad omen, and everyone was visibly very scared. The king reports that the council decided that Raken's body would be buried after the birth of a new guardian dragon. Talon states that in this case, the ruler should look into Mistress Lucina's bedroom more often. Hakan thinks that he is grateful to his wife for her decision, but they should not rush. At this moment, the priestess calls out to the ruler and declares that she has news for him. The woman says that she has the results ready and would like to discuss them with the king. Looking through the scribbled sheets of paper, Gilly says with surprise that the girl understands everything perfectly. The young man is sure that at such a speed the girl will learn the language in a week, but he could not even imagine how quickly the learning would go. The guy continues that, unlike Titi, Lucina learns incredibly slowly. Out of 10 words, she has 9 mistakes. Titi stands up for her mistress and says that she is just learning to write and will soon succeed. The young man notices that in a month, Lucina should also learn the language, and at that moment the sheets fly out of his hands. While Titi is collecting the sheets, Gilly notices that something is wrong with Lucina. The girl says that something got into her eye. At this moment, Hakan comes into the garden and sees a very significant scene. The king approaches the young people and threateningly asks what the hell they are doing here. Lucina begins to say something incoherently. Titi translates that something got into the lady's eye, and Gilly was just trying to help. The lady is very worried, and the maid continues to translate that they decided to learn writing and reading, and the master volunteered to help them. The king is perplexed to learn that he gave his wife books, but she cannot read, so she had to look for help. Titi translates that according to the lady, Gilly is smart and teaches well, but she does not have any special feelings for him. The wife approaches the ruler and declares that he is the only one she likes. Patting the girl on the head, the husband says that he had no idea about her problems and should have just said so. Hakan notes that it's normal to learn what you don't know, and Lucina is good for finding a smart person and asking him for help. Looking at the young man, the king asks if he is confident that he can cope with the training of Lucina and Titi. Gilai bows respectfully and says that in the worst case, they will learn to read and write in a month. Hakan extends his hand to the young man and notices that he is a weak warrior, but he has no equal in knowledge, so he completely relies on him. Squeezing Gilly's hand, the ruler quietly says that if he touches Lucina again, he won't get away with it so easily. Turning to his wife, Hakan notes that it is already late and he should finish his studies for today. The girl nods in agreement, and her husband picks her up in his arms to carry her to the palace. Gilly walks down the corridor and irritably thinks that if Hakan had not been a great king, Lucina would not have batted an eyelid in his direction. Entering the chambers, the young man sees his sister, who asks him to come over and declares that they need to talk. The king tells his wife that the result of the diagnosis of her body is ready, and the priestess said that she discovered something strange. Hakan says that the girl lacks vitamins. Her body is weak, but her vitality exceeds the strength of others. Listening carefully to her husband, Lucina realizes that it's all about her healing abilities. The man notices that since the girl's strength is great, it will help her overcome the energy of fire, but he is worried about something else. Remembering the fainting spells, Lucina reflects that just having the power to heal does not make her body strong enough. Hakan says that in 2 months he will begin his prime, so soon he will have to take medicine and abstain. The wife looks at her husband in bewilderment and asks what the heyday is. The man explains that during this period the possibility of conceiving a child increases, but since the fire energy is unusually strong during this period, he needs medicine to control it. The king offers to check his wife's condition in 2 months and then discuss whether their intimacy is permissible. Hakan puts Lucina on the bed and invites her to rest while he goes to his chambers. The girl holds her husband back and wonders how much his abstinence limits them. Seeing a blank look, Lucina is asked if they can't just sleep together. The wife notices that the ruler has been very busy lately, and she wanted to spend time with him at least at night. Lying in bed, Lucina is happy as a child, while Hakan realizes that this was not the best idea. The man can barely restrain himself, feeling his wife's touch, and the girl suddenly asks if it's possible to get at least one kiss. Lucina embarrassedly covers herself with a sheet and asks for at least one small, quick kiss. The king turns to his wife, silently praying to the great ancestors for the will and patience to endure and not do anything stupid. Unable to cope with his emotions, the king abruptly throws Lucina onto her back and hangs over her. Gathering his will, Hakan abruptly jumps to the other end of the room and growls that they shouldn't do this. The man states that for the next 2 months it will be better for them to sleep in separate rooms. Embarrassed, Hakan explains that if you are going to abstain, you should do it properly. The husband admits that if he touches or kisses his wife again, he will not be able to restrain himself and will go too far. Lucina asks in despair whether she can really only look at her husband for the next 2 months. The girl with tears in her eyes says that so far nothing has happened because they held hands and kissed. Suddenly, Hakan picks up some kind of cloth and declares that it is necessary to tie his hands. The girl shackles the man, who asks if she is sure that he will not be able to untie his hands. Lucina checks everything carefully, and the king notices that now she can do whatever she wants with him. Without keeping him waiting, the wife presses herself against the man and begins to kiss him tenderly. Carrot tells his brother that Hakan is a descendant of a dragon and is also a Tayer, making him ideal for using black magic. Gilai, horrified, says that this is too dangerous because the man is a great king. The young man is sure that if he does something strange, the whole palace will know about it. The brother says with fear that if he and his sister are caught, they will consider it treason. Carrot tells his frightened brother that he needs to make sure that no one finds out, and notes that Hakan's heyday will soon come. During their prime, dragons are very unstable. The stronger the fire energy, the more violent they become. Taking the plate in her hands, the woman notices that the energy is blocked by the medicine, but an accident can still happen. Throwing a plate at his brother's feet, Carrot declares that if an accident happens to the king's partner, the ministers will lose patience. The woman assures that if Hakan kills his wife, she will be greatly weakened, and it will be easier for her to get the king to marry her. Gently patting his brother on the head, Carrot says in a soft voice that he is asking for this for the last time. The sister asks for help and promises that she will never ask her brother for such cruel things again. Carrot assures that if everything works out, then Gilai will be able to heal his mental pain and live in peace. The sister promises that his brother can go wherever he wants, and she will send people with him to keep an eye on him. Carrot confidently says that it is time for Gilayu to come out of her shadow and live his own life. Lucina notices with surprise that Hakan is breathing very loudly and his heart is beating incredibly fast. The girl fearfully removes her hands from her husband's body and realizes that it's really worth stopping. The wife sits to the side, but the king begins to growl menacingly and asks her not to stop. There is a crash, the bonds break, and Hakan jumps on his wife, pinning her to the bed. Having pulled himself together with incredible efforts, the king jumps up and shouts that he cannot do this. Turning to the door, Hakan orders the guards to bring chains that even the guardian dragon cannot break. Noticing that Lucina is laughing, the man irritably remarks that she is the one on the verge of death. Gile muses that it is dangerous to use black magic when Hakan and Lucina are alone. The young man thinks about how to intimidate the king, but so that the girl does not get hurt. The brother tells his sister that when he loses consciousness, the magic is immediately destroyed, and if this happens, the overlord can understand that he has been subjected to an illusion. Rising from the floor, the young man says that he needs to change his magic instrument. Gilai shows Carrot a candle and says that it is made with the addition of his blood. With its help, the effect of magic will not subside, even if he goes crazy from pain. The woman looks at her brother in bewilderment and asks why, in this case, he did not use candles earlier. Approaching his sister's ear, Gilly begins to whisper something in her ear. A smile lights up Carrot's face, and she asks if what her brother said is true. Fuka cannot believe that Lucina tied Hakan with chains, and she slept like that. The elf asks if the couple will really do nothing for 2 months, because Hakan wants a child so much. Lucina says that she must first get stronger, because despite her strength, her body is weak. Fuka says that the girl is weak because she has earth energy, but if she has a dragon child in her belly, her condition will stabilize. Lucina listens in surprise that a child with fiery energy will help her, but for the rest, it will be enough if the girl eats well. Lucina reveals that she heard that having a dragon child would put her life in danger. The elf replies that this only applies to ordinary people. During pregnancy, the girl will be able to use her power, directing it to protect her body. After thinking for a moment, Lucina asks if her powers will return after the birth of her child. Fuka eats peanuts with gusto and declares that this is completely obvious. The girl jumps for joy and reproachfully asks why her friend didn't tell her about this earlier. Fuka, confused by his friend's lack of understanding, declares that she had never asked him about this before. The girl runs joyfully along the corridor. She must tell Hakan everything so that she no longer has to wait and take medicine. Lucina wants to finally talk about her healing abilities, with the help of which she can safely give birth. Handmaids enter Hakan's chambers, one of whom reports that she has brought medicine given by the priest. Suddenly, the king notices how the second girl is holding flowers in her hands and asks what she is going to do. The maid explains that Talon ordered the master's room to be decorated because Mrs. Lucina often comes here, so she brought flowers and a candle. The king drinks the medicine, thinking that Talon gave a very practical order. Hakan inhales the smell of flowers and a burning candle and wonders if Lucina will like it all. The girl runs into the chambers, joyfully takes her husband's arm and declares that she needs to tell him something important. Turning sharply, Hakan grabs his wife's fragile hand, causing her noticeable pain. The king pulls the girl towards him and Lucina screams in fear. The man grabs the girl with furious desire, tearing the jewelry on her clothes. Suddenly, Hakan closes his eyes sharply, not understanding what is happening to him. The king turns to his wife and says that he does not feel very well, and the girl should better return to her place. The man sits down at the table, continuing to inhale the vapor from the candle, and wonders what is happening to him. The energy of fire intensifies as the heyday approaches, but there are still 2 months before it. Maybe this time it begins earlier than expected. Lucina lies in bed and thinks that Hakan acted very strangely today. The girl recalls that the atmosphere in her husband's chambers was so oppressive that she could not utter a word out of fear. Noticing that the lady cannot sleep, faithful Titi invites her to swim in the hot spring, after which she will quickly fall asleep. Lucina plunges into the hot water with great joy, sighing with pleasure. The girl fools around, showing Titi how well she can swim. Hakan goes to the pool, hoping that by taking a dip in the holy water he can calm the energy. Suddenly, the king hears voices coming from the pool and sneaks a peek from behind a column. Titi helps the mistress dry her hair, and the girls, enthusiastically discussing something, laugh joyfully. Hakan cannot take his eyes off his wife. Lucina is incredibly beautiful when she smiles. Suddenly, the king's mind becomes foggy and he begins to see strange images. Gilly says that the black magic he usually uses works immediately after choosing a target, and the victim begins to see illusions. As soon as the young man loses consciousness, the victim is immediately freed from illusions. But when using a candle, the victim will see illusions every time he experiences feelings. Gilly continues to say that at first the illusions will be short and weak, because consciousness does not give in easily. But the more time passes, the stronger and brighter the visions will be. A vision appears before Hakan's eyes, as if Lucina is tenderly hugging Galai and is about to kiss him. The man, in a rage, hits the wall with his fist and rushes into the pool, deciding to immediately deal with the traitors. Suddenly appearing with a face twisted with rage, the king greatly frightens the girl. Lucina looks at her husband in fear and asks if he did something wrong. The fog in his head cleared, and the man muttered that it seemed to him as if the girl was falling into the water, which is why he appeared so quickly. Lucina inquires about her husband's well-being, to which he replies that he is tired and hopes that holy water will help him. The girl calms down and again tries to start a conversation about something important. Turning away, Hakan says that it is already late, and they will talk about everything later. Without looking at his wife, the king orders Titi to take Lady Lucina to her chambers. The man doesn't understand why anger flares up in him every time he sees Lucina. Has he really gone crazy? Gilly is sure that as soon as the illusion disappears, the memories of it are erased, but the feelings remain. Hakan, without realizing it, will gradually begin to experience negative feelings towards Lucina. The brother and sister will not have to get rid of the girl, because the king himself will reject her. The young man really hopes that Lucina will not suffer, and that her relationship with the ruler will naturally end, and then she will come to him. The great king comes to the priestess and declares that something is definitely wrong with him. The teacher says that for each correct answer, the girls will receive 2 stars. Gilly notices that Titi already has 30 stars, but Lucina has very few. The young man tells the maid to go to the library and bring the books on the list. Gilly stares at Lucina and asks what happened to her. Did Hakan upset her again? The girl's eyes fill with tears, but she stubbornly refuses to talk about anything. Gilly irritably asks the girl to stop crying and explain normally what happened. Lucina sadly replies that nothing bad happened. The king has just been in a bad mood lately. The young man notices that Hakan has always been emotional and rude, like a child. Lucina angrily asks why Gilly always scolds the king, and the young man wonders why the girl always defends him. Lucina confidently says that poor health and mood are associated with the fact that the heyday is approaching. The girl understands that she should not see the ruler and be with him, but she really wants this. Gilly pushes a pen to the girl and notes that it is not necessary to talk to her husband in person. You can write to him. Lucina grabs the paper, noting that this is a really great idea, and she'll get some practice at the same time. Checking what was written, Gilly notes with horror that the letter is simply monstrous. The guy rolls up the paper and declares that the letter is written simply beautifully and can be sent without corrections. The priestess confidently declares that the ruler's mood is unstable due to the approaching heyday, and this is not dangerous. The woman explains that the stronger the energy, the more difficult it is to control emotions, especially when you are with someone for whom you have strong feelings. The priestess assures that Raken also had a hard time during this period after his meetings with Carrot. This is natural, and the king has nothing to worry about. The maid brings a message on a tray and says that Mrs. Lucina wrote a letter to the master. The girl notices that the candle has gone out and offers to light it again. Hakan just nods, immersed in reading. The man looks at the message in bewilderment, completely not understanding what is written in it. Suddenly, the king starts laughing, noting that Lucina is simply the best when it comes to Thayer's letter. The man decides to read the letter to the end, but suddenly his eyes are again clouded by a dark fog. It seems to Håkon that his wife is writing that she wants to run away hand in hand with the person she really loves, and all her words were lies. The king is horrified by the words that if he had not been born, Mrs. Ader and Riken would have been happy. The guards suddenly hear screams from the master's chambers. The king loudly orders someone to shut up. The warriors run into the chambers and see that Håkon, clutching his head, is sitting completely alone. The man looks at the scraps of the letter in confusion and wonders why he was so angry. Titi overhears the maids talking about how the great king was furious after receiving a letter from his wife. The maid realizes with amazement that this is the very letter that Mr. Gilai was supposed to check. The next day, Titi comes early and tells the teacher that she needs to talk to him before the mistress comes. Titi decisively asks what Mr. Gilai is up to. The young man, in a panic, wonders how a simple maid could find out that he uses black magic. The maid says that the king was very angry after reading the letter from her mistress. The girl says that Gilai personally checked the letter, so he really didn't remove all the oddities from it. The young man replies that there were spelling errors, but there were no problems with the content. The teacher decided to leave everything as it was, because in this form, the mistress's feelings were better conveyed. Titi asks in confusion if the great king was really so angry that the lady wrote with mistakes. Gilly muses that apparently the effect of his magic was reflected in the reading of the letter. Suddenly, the young people turn around sharply, hearing a scream, and realize that Lucina heard their conversation. The girl cannot believe that Håkon became very angry after receiving a message from her. Titi asks in bewilderment why the lady came here alone. Lucina absent-mindedly replies that she looked everywhere for the maid, but didn't find her, and decided to come to class alone. The girl sadly asks if it is true that her husband was angry because she wrote with mistakes. Titi begins to wave her hands, and they assure that she was definitely mistaken about this, because the great king is not that kind of person at all. Gilai takes Titi's side and assures him that the king would not get angry over such nonsense. Lucina states that Håkon is truly not that kind of person, which means there has been a misunderstanding. Gilly asks himself why he is protecting the king, because Lucina must move away from Håkon, having lost faith in him. The guy understands that despite all his plans, he doesn't want to inadvertently hurt the girl. Suddenly, the young man hears that Lucina wants to meet her husband and talk to him. Gilai fears for the girl's safety and says that she should not meet with the ruler while he is in a bad mood. Lucina resolutely declares that everything is in order, but she needs to tell her husband something important. The girl turns sharply, intending to go to the ruler, but Gilai suddenly grabs her hand. Unable to think of anything better, the young man asks if Lucina will miss today's class. Titi intervenes and states that she will stay in class and then pass on what she has learned to the mistress. Lucina looks with gratitude at her faithful maid, who always helps her in everything. The girl runs away, and Gilai worries that she may be in great danger and decides to follow. Håkon realizes that something strange is happening to him, not understanding whether this is all connected with the heyday. The man remembers sudden outbursts of anger that he cannot control, and immediately after the attack, he cannot remember the reason. At first, the king thought that it was all about the medicine he was taking, but after stopping it, nothing changed, which means the reason was something else. Håkon remembers everything that happened in the last days. The moment comes to mind when the maid brought flowers and a candle. Also, the same maid lit the candle again when the king read the letter from Lucina. The man understands that the whole problem may be in the candle, and he needs to give it to the priestess to check. Suddenly, Lucina runs into Håkon's chambers with a joyful shout. The girl is trying to catch her breath from running fast, and declares that she urgently has to tell her something important. Looking around, the wife suggests going inside. She doesn't want their conversation to be heard. Håkon says that he doesn't understand what happened, but if the girl wants it that way, they will go inside. The couple sits down at the table, on which the candle is still burning, and the king notices that now the wife can speak calmly. Lucina reports that Håkon has been in poor health and mood lately, so she is very worried about him. The man is enveloped in candle smoke and hears that, according to Lucina, he no longer needs to take medicine. Closing her eyes, the girl admits that they have nothing to fear anymore because she has healing abilities. Opening her eyes, Lucina looks at her husband but does not recognize him. The king has changed his face and looks very threatening. The girl thinks in confusion that she expected a joyful reaction to her words and asks what is happening to her husband. Hakan at this time sees that Lucina is telling Gile about her abilities, promising that she will cure him. The king's face contorts with rage, and he asks with a threat in his voice, "How dare a girl deceive him?" Lucina, not knowing what her husband sees, upsetly says that she told the truth. The Lord shouts that all his wife's words about love were lies, and Gilai must have used some dirty method to seduce. Lucina realizes that Hakan is behaving very strangely. It feels like he sees someone else in the chambers. At this time, the man sees how his wife kisses another, and in rage says that the opponent himself doomed himself to death. Gilai approaches the chambers and asks if the great king is at home, to which the guard replies that the ruler is with Mrs. Lucina. The young man is afraid that the king, under the influence of black magic, may harm the girl. Suddenly, Gilai and the guards hear loud screams and crashes from the king's chambers. Without hesitation, the young man rushes inside, calling for Mrs. Lucina. Bursting into the chambers, Gilai sees the ruler standing and an unconscious girl lying next to him on the floor. The young man turns to the entrance and shouts to the guards to urgently enter the chambers. The guy lifts the girl in his arms, thinking that she should not have been allowed to see the king. Lucina barely audibly says that Hakan is behaving very strangely, and the young man assures that the girl needs to leave here. The girl declares that she cannot leave her husband alone, and she must use her powers. Maybe then he will feel better. Watching the approaching ruler, Gilai realizes that the king's condition is now too dangerous for the girl. Hakan furiously attacks the young man, shouting that they have all deceived him and made him look like a fool. The girl puts her hands on her husband. She is not sure that she can help, but if she does nothing at all, then both men could get hurt. Clinging to Hakan and activating her power, Lucina begs him to come to his senses. Unclenching his hands, the king comes to his senses and tries to understand what happened. Lucina looks at the former king with joy, thinking about what she accomplished. Having caught his falling wife, the ruler does not understand what he wanted to do, but the girl definitely helped him. A guard with maids runs in and announces that he has brought a priestess. Hakan says that Lucina is unconscious, but there is no threat. He will take her to her chambers, and the priestess should take care of Gilai. One of the maids quietly leaves the room and sends a note with a dove. The priestess reports that she checked the candle that the great king pointed out to her. The woman notices that it is impossible to determine exactly, but some kind of magic was definitely cast on her. The king orders the candle to be destroyed immediately and asks what happened to Lucina. Hearing that his wife is fine with only scratches and bruises, Hakan declares that he must see her immediately. Approaching the chambers, the king tells Titi that he has come to visit Lucina. The man goes inside, and the maid tells him that the lady still hasn't woken up. Gently stroking his wife, Hakan sadly says that she suffered because he was exposed to black magic. The man begs the girl to wake up as soon as possible because he wants to beg her forgiveness. Suddenly, one of the warriors runs into the chambers and reports with alarm that a big disaster has happened. Hakan is surprised to hear that the Hetcheling fortress has been attacked by enemies. The maid fearfully reports that the king guessed about the candle and ordered it to be examined. The girl adds that at this rate it will soon become known who is behind all this. Carrot replies that the girl need not be afraid and say that she was forced by blackmail to participate in everything. The maid notes in bewilderment that then Madame Carrot will be in danger. The woman calmly replies that no one will have evidence that she is to blame for everything. Carrot says with satisfaction that all responsibility for what happened will fall on Lucina. To implement Carrot's plans, it is necessary to ensure that Hakan leaves the palace for as long as possible. Heading towards the fortress, the king angrily thinks that he already has enough problems, and Slayer's people decided to attack. Talon reports that the barrier of the fortress was destroyed quickly enough, which means their leader is with the enemies. Hakan remembers that the last time the barrier was destroyed was 10 years ago, and that's when Raken was killed. Talon notices in confusion that he does not understand why the enemies are so desperately rushing towards them. Hakan firmly states that this time they must put an end to it, and he will take revenge for the events of 10 years ago. Arriving at the barrier, the king learns from the guards that at the moment the damage is very minor. Hakan looks at Talon in bewilderment, but the warrior assures that he was informed that the situation is an emergency. At this moment, the king realizes that all this was done in order to lure him here. The overlord states that they need to return, but Talon says that they do not know when the enemy will decide to attack. Hakan shouts that this is all a trap, and he was brought here on purpose. Suddenly, an enemy army with a leader at its head appears on the other side of the barrier. Hakan orders everyone to prepare for the attack and declares that he will take charge. The leader of the Slayers notes with a grin that 10 years have already passed, and the boy looks even better than reported. Hakan is surprised to hear a woman's voice. Then the head did not reveal his identity, and no one could have expected that he would be a woman. Snatching her weapon with lightning speed, the dragon puts the blade to the enemy's throat and asks what she's up to. The rival just as quickly draws her sword and expresses the hope that Hakan will last longer in battle than his brother. The dragon delivers powerful blows one after another. The opponent notices that over the past time, the enemy's fighting skills have noticeably improved. Hakan shouts in rage that he will cut off the leader's head and present it to the people of Thayer. After delivering several crushing blows, the king eventually knocks the sword out of his rival's hands. The woman abruptly snatches a black arrow from her quiver and forcefully plunges it into the dragon's stomach. The last thing Hakan hears before falling is Talon's loud cry. Lucina sits up abruptly in bed and asks Titi where Hakan is. The maid responds that the great king went to defend the Hetcheling fortress, but he personally came to visit the lady. Having learned about the attack, the girl jumps out of bed and quickly runs to the exit. In the courtyard, Titi throws a blanket over Lucina, fearing that she might catch a cold. Suddenly, the girls hear the sound of hooves, and the maid notices that the great king must have returned. Looking at the warriors, Lucina realizes with alarm that she does not see Hakan among them. Noticing Talon, the girl runs up to him and asks where the great king is. The warrior says that the overlord entered into battle with a fighter and was severely wounded by a black arrow. Talon says that now they will take Hakan to the holy cave and pray for him to survive. Lucina resolutely declares that she will go with them because she can cure Hakan.